Chapter 1420. Crack. A strange voice resounded in the sky. The golden light on the dragon's claw dimmed. Then the palm print that was comparable to the Saint realm froze in the void. The scene was simply too shocking. It caused the expressions of everyone to suddenly freeze. They were like numerous ice sculptures that were numb and silent. Crack. In the end, the dragon print dissipated, turning into ice and snow that drifted down. As for that peerlessly beautiful figure in green, she suddenly stepped out of the wind and snow like a snow immortal. She descended from the ancient times and was calm and unperturbed. She reached out her hand, and there seemed to be a cold wave behind her, enveloping the sky and suppressing the world. In the endless wind and snow, there was a fairy figure standing tall. It was snow white, as if it was made of ice crystals. Seeing this, Sure how Ian's face became gloomier. He took a deep breath and clenched his hands. The vast dragon she instantly shattered the sky and soared for thousands of miles. His two arms were covered in golden scales, and long nails extended from his fingertips like real dragon claws. He clawed at the sky. True dragon sky, splitting seal. Sure how Ian roared. His body surged with spiritual light, and his blood was at its peak. A golden dragon's shadow suddenly floated in the air. Every golden scale on its body was filled with endless Taoist rhymes. The world suddenly darkened. A terrifying power pressed down, causing many of the clan's geniuses to turn pale. They had no choice but to retreat dozens of feet. The dragon's shadow tore through the air and let out an ear-piercing roar. The figure in green still calmly pointed with her finger. She had no intention of dodging. The sound of wind could be heard, and the void was suddenly filled with wind and snow. Pieces of ice crystals fell from the sky, majestic and magnificent. Just as the ice crystals fell on the golden dragon's body, spiritual inscriptions quietly appeared, connecting heaven and earth and intertwining. It was like a large net that directly suppressed the dragon's shadow, making it difficult for it to break free. Sure how Ian was stunned. His eyes suddenly flashed with a hint of gloominess. Both of his hands formed a series of hand seals. Golden light suddenly surged around the dragon's shadow, and it actually exploded out of thin air. Boom! A terrifying spiritual aura swept through the heavens and the earth. The green-robed woman frowned slightly, and her footsteps suddenly stopped. Thousands of miles of wind and snow shuddered and turned into a barrier of 1,000 feet in front of him, blocking all the attacks. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Sure how Hien took a step forward. Like a human-shaped, vicious beast, he instantly appeared before the ice barrier. Then, he pushed his fists forward, and a fist imprint that contained the power of a true dragon crashed down, piercing a crack through the ice curtain. But just as he was about to land his second punch, the ice curtain suddenly collapsed on its own, covering the sky and drowning his figure in an instant. Divine runes lit up on every piece of ice crystal, and they contained a supreme divine aura. The heavens and earth were silent, and there was no sound at all. Everyone looked at the figure falling from the sky in horror. Looking at the ice crystals covering his body, there was nothing but shock in their eyes. Plop! The current Sure How Yin was already completely wrapped up by the ice crystals, turning into a sculpture. There was no sign of life to speak of. The green-robed woman, on the other hand, stood in the air with a cold expression. Then, she turned to look at Ling Xiao, and a bright and playful smile appeared on her originally cold face. This completely different side of her caused the faces of countless clan youths to freeze. But in the blink of an eye, they understood. With Master Ling Xiao's charm, which girl in the Qing Tsang continent could resist him? It turned out that the ice and snow lady's indifference was only for the common people. In front of the young master, they would show different temperaments. Crack! But just as the green-clothed woman took a step forward and was about to rush towards Ling Xiao, a strange shattering sound suddenly rang out in front of the ancient forest. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound, and in the next moment, their eyes froze. At the same time, in the Sure clan's ancestral land, Sure, he sat in the middle of the hall with his eyes closed. In front of him, a few elders of the Sure family were gathered around an old man, their faces full of bitterness. Dr. Hua, is there really no other way? I. The young master was born with heavenly eyes and is different from others. Even though he dug out his own eyes, these mortal eyes cannot match the young master. The elder shook his head and sighed, his eyes full of bitterness. He was close friends with many of the Sure clan's ancestors and had a deep relationship with them. He also knew of Sure Yi's talent and was certain that Sure Yi would lead the Sure clan back to glory. Who would have thought that the usually calm Sure Yi would make such a rash decision a few days ago? He dug out his own eyes and gave them to Sure Haoyan. This action was, without a doubt, cutting off his own path to immortality. No matter how talented Sure Yi was, without something to rely on, he would only end up as a normal person. How sad. How sad. Elders, there is no need to waste your energy. Sure, he shook his head and smiled. His expression was calm. Back when Sure Haoyan came out of isolation, he had fought against him. The final result was that Sure Yi lost by a little. But Sure Haoyan was kind by nature and was not an evil person. Even though Sure Yi dug out his bloodline, he still could not kill this brother who had taken care of him since he was young. Just as Sure Haoyan was about to leave the Sure clan and find Ling Xiao to wash away his humiliation, Sure Yi did something that shocked everyone. He dug out his own eyes and gave them to Sure Haoyan. He also helped him merge with them. Just like back then, he had personally told Sure Haoyan that whoever lost should become a sacrifice, offer up everything for Sure family. This time, he was defeated. Therefore, he did not complain and even protected Sure Haoyan. But he provoked Ling Xiao and didn't die once. This was the bottom line of the Ling people. This time, regardless of whether Sure Haoyan wins or loses, the Sure clan will face an endless amount of disaster. In other words, if Sure Haoyan loses, the Sure clan will truly suffer a crushing defeat. If he wins, he may be able to keep his life, but the Sure clan will have to endure the anger of the Ling people. However, Sure Haoyan had already made up his mind. He could not persuade him at all. Therefore, the moment Sure Haoyan walked out of the ancestral land, Sure Yi sealed the ancestral land and completely hid from the world. There was still a trace of hope in his heart. His Sure clan's ancestor rose from the chaotic times and killed countless descendants of great clans. He even had the bloodline of the ancient emperor. Only then did he reach the top step by step. Now, Sure Haoyan's immortal path was very similar to his ancestors. If Sure Haoyan could really swallow the resentment in his heart, Sure Yi would look down on him. However, unlike his ancestor, Sure Haoyan not only awakened the bloodline of the Supreme Saint body, but also merged with his. Polychoria. Such saint luck might be a chance for the Sure clan to fight for the heavens. Wasn't this path of invincibility about defeating the enemies that were originally unsurpassable again and again like this? Elders, the moment I took out my divine eye, I have never regretted it. Senior Hua, thank you for your trouble. Sure Yi's tone was clear. He was facing a group of supreme saints, but he was neither servile nor overbearing. Actually, there might be one person in the world who can help you recover from your injuries. Elder Hua muttered to himself and suddenly said. Chapter 1421. Who is it? The group of Sure clan's supreme beings was shocked. Their eyes shone again. The descendant of the lonely mountain. Old man Hua sighed and said with awe, "It said that this person's Tao of medicine is unparalleled and his talent is peerless." Half a month after he appeared, he didn't fight for supremacy. Instead, he helped the world by practicing medicine and saving people who were about to die. What? He saved people who were about to die? Hearing this, the Sure clan's elders were stunned. Then what are we waiting for? Elder Hua. However, this person's personality is strange. He doesn't care about fame or fortune. He saves people based on his own interests. I'm not sure if I can invite him here. I can only try my best. Elder Hua sighed. His eyes were full of respect. A descendant of the lonely mountain not only had unparalleled combat ability, but he also had the heart to practice medicine. In today's chaotic world, there were many monsters. However, these people were all born to fight for the heavenly fate and to reach the peak of the world. But this descendant of the lonely mountain was different. He took a different path and loved the world. Then, thank you, Elder Hua. All the Supreme Being experts bowed, while the old man with the surname Hua returned the greeting. He glanced at Shi again, then turned around and walked out of the hall. At the same time, at the entrance of the world of dead souls, Shi Haoyan, who was covered in ice, suddenly had a trace of vitality. Then, two beams of light shot out from his eyes and tore apart the sky. As for the ice crystals on his body, they instantly shattered like glass. The sky suddenly darkened. Only that beam of light was left. It was like the first ray of light at the end of the universe. Wherever it passed, a new era began and a new era arrived. At this moment, all the heaven's favorites in the barren mountains and forests felt their souls tremble, especially the four pupils in Shi Haoyan's eyes. They were strange and evil, but they gave people a strange pressure. It was as if everything in the world should wither under the gaze of those eyes. Everyone knew that those with dual pupils were undefeatable. Rumor had it that those with dual pupils who appeared in every era would eventually reach the peak of the world and become supreme. After all, those with dual pupils were even more terrifying than those with ordinary saintly or divine bodies. However, it had been 300 years since Shi Haoyan was born. No one had ever heard of him having such a trump card. On the other hand, the young master of the Shi family, Shi, was said to have been born with divine eyes and extraordinary looks. Unfortunately, Shi's disposition was too gloomy and emotionless, so he didn't have a good reputation in the Azure Sky world. They never expected that when Shi Haoyan appeared today, he would also awaken this type of talent. Could it be that the Shi family was going to prosper? Polychoria is the path to invincibility, Shi Haoyan said in a low voice. He raised his head and looked at the beautiful figure in green in the air. Just a single ray of light from his eyes caused the world to lose its color and the ice crystals to shatter. When she saw this scene, the green-clothed woman's expression turned slightly serious. She was just about to use her ability when she suddenly heard a warm laugh from below. Ching Chanum, the green-robed woman, stopped in her tracks and lowered her head to look at Ling Xiao. At that moment, the latter smiled brightly and waved at her. "Come back, young master." Yi Qingchan's eyes were cold, but she didn't dare to show the slightest bit of disobedience. She looked at Shi Haoyan with a cold expression, then lifted her feet and landed beside Ling Xiao. "Leave it to me." At that moment, Yi Qingchan's cultivation had also reached the 9th level of the Venerable Realm, and even her luck had risen to 20,000. However, although the outcome of such a battle between the heavenly wills would most likely be related to luck, the process would definitely be extremely tragic. There was no need and no meaning. If Shi Haoyan appeared a little later and accumulated enough luck, even if Ling Xiao wanted to kill him, it would probably take more effort. But now, he only had 10,000 luck in total. He didn't even need to use the luck-stealing talisman to kill Shi Haoyan on the spot. "Young master, that ray of light." Yi Qingchan's expression was slightly serious. Even if she had obtained the inheritance of the Foliaceae ancestor, it wouldn't be easy to kill Shi Haoyan. Of course, she naturally trusted Ling Xiao. She just didn't want her young master to be hurt because of this. "Don't worry." Ling Xiao nodded slightly and walked in front of Yi Qingchan, standing opposite Shi Haoyan. At that moment, the young master of the Shi family had 4 pupils that were filled with endless battle intent. Seeing Ling Xiao walk out, a smile immediately appeared on his face. "You're finally willing to make a move?" "Stubborn." Ling Xiao didn't say anything else. The moment he took a step forward, 100 sword shadows suddenly whistled out from behind him. Immediately, the entire green sky shattered. The smile on Shi Haoyan's face had not even disappeared before it completely froze. At that moment, he could feel that the 100 ancient swords had all reached the level of a sacred artifact. More importantly, the 100 swords were surrounded by different rules of order. They stood in the void like a torrent of sword intent that shocked the heavens and the earth. In fact, Sure Haoyan didn't doubt that once the 100 swords slashed down, even with his powerful physical body, it would collapse. Damn it! Sure Haoyan clenched his teeth and suppressed the fear in his heart. Suddenly, divine light bloomed in his eyes. A terrifying aura quietly recovered, and a black underworld bird struggled out from his eyes and flew towards Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao's eyes turned cold. The sword bones all over his body vibrated, and his palm suddenly swung down. Buzz! An ear-piercing sword sound suddenly rang out. 100 sword shadows instantly tore through the void and slashed towards Sure Haoyan angrily. However, at that moment, the underworld raven's body suddenly expanded several times and turned into a demon shadow that was 100 feet long. It was like an underworld flame that burned everything. The terrifying heat spread for thousands of miles. Even the void seemed to be unable to withstand the underworld flame and shattered. The sword momentum that was originally slashing down was more than half destroyed by the underworld flame. However, even so, the 100 sword intense still shattered the underworld flame and fell from the sky. Seeing this, Sure Haoyan didn't panic at all. The dragon aura around him surged, and his entire body seemed to be made of pure gold, exuding an unparalleled, domineering aura. However, just when everyone thought that Sure Haoyan was going to use the true dragon sacred body to resist Ling Xiao's sword momentum, black flames rose in his eyes again. Immediately after, the four eyes actually transformed into the appearance of a whirlpool, and his figure actually disappeared on the spot under everyone's shocked gazes. Boom! The 100 swords slashed horizontally, and the entire ancient forest was shattered. However, Ling Xiao's eyes showed a hint of surprise for the first time. At that moment, he could feel a faint fluctuation of space behind him. Sure Haoyan's palm, that had completely transformed into a dragon arm, almost instantly pierced through the sky and smashed onto his shoulder. Dong! Accompanied by a muffled sound, a frightening scene appeared. At that moment, Sure Haoyan's eyes were filled with viciousness, and a smile spread on the corner of his mouth. However, all of this froze the moment his fist landed on Ling Xiao's body. Chapter 1422. Oh! Ling Xiao stood in the sky and stretched his body slightly. In the next moment, he suddenly turned around and punched out. The sky cried out in grief and instantly shattered. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts rushed into the sky, forming many strange phenomena. Wherever the fist passed, the void cracked for hundreds of miles. There seemed to be the shadow of a god or demon appearing and then shattering. Sure Haoyan's face turned pale. Even though he had awakened the true dragon saint body, he still felt his mind tremble when he felt the weight of the fist. He almost collapsed. Then, the black vortex appeared in his eyes again, and his body appeared hundreds of feet away. The power of the dual pupils? Ling Xiao frowned slightly as he stood in the sky. At this moment, he could feel a trace of spatial fluctuation from the black vortex. It was obvious that the power to travel through time and space came from Sure Haoyan's dual pupils. It could only be said that Sure Haoyan's talent was unrivaled, although Sure Haoyan's providence was far inferior to Yi Qingchan and the others. One had to know that he had only awakened his providence for about a year. If he was given another 10 or 100 years, no one knew how much this young master of the Sure family would grow. Yes, Ling Xiao liked to raise pigs before, such as Zhang Jiuji and Lin Shi. However, he had enough methods to deal with these children of destiny. After all, their greatest reliance was not their talent, but the grandpas in their soul seas and rings. However, Sure Haoyan was different. Or rather, the bloodline of the Sure family meant that Ling Xiao would not be so careless. Most of the experts of this family started from humble beginnings. They relied on their own strength to rise to the top step by step. Therefore, Sure Haoyan had to die today. Thinking of this, Ling Xiao's eyes were filled with killing intent, but he did not act rashly. If he could not break through Sure Haoyan's dual pupils, no attack could touch him at all. Therefore, the most important thing was to trap him in one place. Of course, Hao Yin was also filled with fear. Before fusing with the dual pupils, he had already conquered Yi with his physical body. Originally, in the heart of the young man from the Shi family, his physical body could not be said to be invincible among his peers, but it was enough to be ranked in the top 3 of his generation. However, even with his full strength, he was unable to shake Ling Xiao in the slightest. Although that punch wasn't his peak strength, it was still enough to destroy any exalted realm expert. However, he was motionless. In fact, when his fist came into contact with Ling Xiao's body, the bones in his arm almost shattered. Too terrifying. This young man's physical body had clearly reached a level that Hao Yin could not comprehend. So what if your physical body is invincible? Hao Yin's eyes were ice cold. His 4 pupils alternated with brilliance. Only now did he realize that the power of the dual pupils was extremely terrifying. But why did Big Brother Yi lose so easily in my hands back then? Could it be that he wanted to pass on the dual pupil inheritance to him on purpose? In fact, Hao Yin couldn't be blamed for having doubts about the true dragon's sacred body. It was just that Ling Xiao's physical body was too strong. In fact, even in the entire 9 heavens, the sky demon body was a top-notch existence. Moreover, Ling Xiao had merged with many children of destiny's sacred bodies and divine bodies. A mere true dragon's sacred body wanted to shake Ling Xiao in terms of physical strength. It was no different from a fool's dream. Ling Xiao, it's time to end this. Hao Yin didn't know what Yi was thinking. However, if he hadn't merged with the dual pupils, he would have been easily crushed by Ling Xiao in today's battle. Big brother, don't worry. I will protect the Shi family in the future. Hao Yin took a deep breath. Spiritual light swirled around his body. His dragon luck stood tall. There were even 2 golden dragon horns protruding from its forehead, making it look extremely ferocious. However, compared to the changes in his physical body, the pair of eyes erupted with incomparable divinity at this moment. It was like a golden barrier, burning with dark and deep flames. Once someone fell into it, even a Saint Realm expert would find it difficult to break free. Interesting, Ling Xiao had some understanding of eye techniques. Back then, he had inherited the Sky Demon's eye and awakened the Blood Moon Forbidden Zone when Yin Xingyun returned to her body. However, the cultivation of this eye technique was too harsh. Therefore, Ling Xiao hadn't been able to take another step forward. However, the power of Hao Yin's dual pupils surprised him. Without these pupils, Hao Yin would at most be a match for one punch. But now he could rely on his eye technique to contend with Ling Xiao. Dual pupils, 8th level prison break. Hao Yin sneered. His eyes suddenly shone brightly. The moment he finished speaking, monstrous underworld fire swept out and covered the entire sky. It completely covered Hao Yin and Ling Xiao's figures. At this moment, everyone could see the black flames surging above the void. It was like a barrier that isolated the divine soul and yin and yang. The kind of scorching and terrifying fluctuation directly burned the void into pieces of dark abyss. It was a ghastly sight. Furthermore, above the prison break, there was a faint shadow of a fiend god standing tall. It suppressed the universe and restricted the gods. What a terrifying attack. Everyone's faces turned pale. At this moment, they couldn't feel the aura of Ling Xiao and Hao Yin at all. Even Xinyuan Weiyang and the others had a hint of worry in their eyes. The strength Hao Yin displayed was enough to fight against many false saints. Although the young master was peerless, being trapped in this prison break was still dangerous. In the prison break, Ling Xiao looked at the figure standing in front of him indifferently. At this moment, Hao Yin's body was covered in black flames. He was like a god of the underworld that controlled this prison break. Ling Xiao, you should be satisfied to be able to die under this forbidden technique. Hao Yin's voice was hoarse and gloomy. His eyes were incomparably scarlet. They were dyed red by blood. When he merged with his dual pupils, he had repeatedly warned him not to use this forbidden technique unless it was a last resort. This forbidden technique's divine power came from the 9 underworlds. Once it was used, he would suffer a backlash. If it was light, he would lose his dual pupils. If it was heavy, he would burn himself. After seeing Ling Zhao's terrifying physical body, Shi Haoyan had no other choice but to use this forbidden technique in an attempt to burn Ling Xiao to death. Yes, you should be satisfied. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. The corners of his mouth suddenly curled up into a sinister smile. Shi Haoyan was stunned again. He instinctively felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. However, before he could do anything, a torrential divine power seemed to crush down from above his head, enveloping the entire prison break. The world in front of him suddenly changed. Shi Haoyan looked around in confusion. He saw layers of mountains and beautiful forests in front of him. Rich spiritual energy surged into multicolored clouds like the flowing Milky Way. It was too much for the eye to take in. Although he was still surrounded by tribulation fire, it was obvious that he wasn't in the 8th layer of purgatory. What's going on? Shi Haoyan's eyes narrowed. The black vortex in his pupils reappeared. Obviously, he was ready to escape. However, the moment he turned to look at Ling Xiao, a blood moon rose in each of his 4 pupils. Chapter 1423. With Ling Zhao's divine soul realm, it was naturally easy for him to capture an honorable realm cultivator and bring him into his realm. With the strength that Shi Haoyan had displayed, if he were to let him escape today, he would definitely be a threat in the future. However, the black vortex pupil technique was too strange and unpredictable. It had the power to travel through space. If Ling Xiao could not trap Shi Haoyan in place, it would be difficult for him to kill this loach. The Blood Moon Forbidden Zone was a mysterious technique that could suppress one's mind and create fear. No matter how terrifying Shi Haoyan's combat strength was, he was still only an honorable realm cultivator. However, once the Sky Demon Pupil technique was used, it would definitely attract the immortal demon Ancient Bell. Therefore, Ling Xiao could only put him into his realm and kill him later. Looking at the dazed and frightened figure in front of him, Ling Xiao smiled sinisterly and pressed his palm down. No, however, as if sensing the surging killing intent around him, at the critical moment, a golden light suddenly lit up outside Shi Haoyan's body. His figure directly turned into a dragon shadow that was 100 feet long and towered in the sky. However, even though this was the case, the aura of the 1,000 feet large dragon shadow still completely weakened the instant Ling Zhao's palm landed. It dissipated and finally shattered. Plop! Shi Haoyan's figure landed on the ground. His entire chest was penetrated by Ling Zhao's palm. His eyes were filled with intense shock. He could not understand why the Polychoria Forbidden Technique suddenly lost its power. He also could not understand what the rising blood moon was and why his Polychoria Divine might could not stop it. Unfortunately, he still could not figure it out. Ling Xiao, I beg you treat. Chow woofed. Before Shi Haoyan's voice fell, Ling Zhao's figure suddenly landed on the ground and directly crushed his head. Huh. Bootlicker. Beep. Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Son of Destiny. Obtained 10,000 luck points and 100,000 villain points. Beep. Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Son of Destiny. Obtained additional rewards. True Dragon's Sacred Body. Polychoria Divine Might. Beep. Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Son of Destiny. Obtained additional rewards. Luck Plundering Talisman. Beep. Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Son of Destiny. Obtained additional rewards. Sky Shrouding Talisman. Able to conceal fate and kill the Son of Destiny for 2 hours. Hearing the system notification, Ling Zhao's face immediately revealed a smile. Sky Shrouding Talisman? Kill the Son of Destiny? Although the system's presence to him, at times, it was really quite considerate. By the time the world of souls opened, there would be a lot of people who were destined to be there. If Ling Xiao wanted to harvest all of them, he couldn't possibly scheme against them one by one. This shrouded talisman was extremely important. In front of the entrance of the world of souls, the void collapsed, and the netherworld flame soared into the sky, as if a calamity had befallen the world. Tion Tion to the two to heavens, to the extent to the Tion Tion Tions. This was especially the case with the fighting strength Sure Hao Ian displayed. It truly made one's heart tremble. There was a bit of indescribable fear. Not to the realm heaven, be heaven to the god. To be Tion, to be realm. At a certain moment, a buzzing sound could be heard in the world. The layers of netherworld flames seemed to be sucked in by a divine force, turning into a vortex. Before anyone could react, another figure fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Plop! Everyone was stunned. The next moment, there was a series of gasps. The head and chest of the falling figure were shattered, but the clothes on his body were easily recognizable. Sure Hao Ian. At this moment, the netherworld flames in the sky dissipated. The golden sun shone down, making the figure look like an immortal. Ling Xiao stood in the sky. Black flames flashed in the depths of his eyes. The power of the dual pupils was originally more terrifying than Sure Hao Ian's. Unfortunately, his cultivation was not high enough, and he had not completely mastered it. He was too impatient. Young master, Yi Qingchan and the others immediately rushed over and surrounded Ling Xiao. They had not seen each other for a year. This new master of the Foliaceae had a different temperament. Deep and cold, it actually had a domineering aura that could control all living things. However, in front of Ling Xiao, she finally let down all her guard. She smiled sweetly, lively, and delicate. Let's go. Ling Xiao nodded lightly and stretched out his hand to hold Yi Qingchan's jade hand, and then he glanced at everyone with a chilly gaze before walking over to the world of souls. In the next moment, Ling Xiao suddenly stretched out his palm, and thousands of sword intents split the world. The entrance barrier that was about to shatter collapsed under the torrential sword aura. Buzz! Vast spiritual energy gushed out, and a pillar of spiritual energy stood in the sky, evolving into endless, auspicious signs. With this statue, Ling Xiao was not worried that those ancient sects would not take the initiative to come to him. His figure immediately disappeared into the layers of spiritual veils. Buzz! Suddenly, the wind and clouds between heaven and earth rose, and countless sounds of wind breaking resounded in the sky. The prodigies who were originally surrounding the entrance turned into streams of light and rushed to the lower realm. The recovery of spiritual energy was a scene that was hard to come by in 10,000 years. At the end of the day, something that could attract such a miraculous event must be a true treasure in the world. With Ling Xiao here, their chances of getting the treasure were naturally very slim. However, if they could find a few peerlessly talented prodigies, it would be a blessing for the various sections. At the same time, in the lower realm, Ling Xiao looked at the world in front of him calmly, and there was not much emotion on his face. Previously, Ling Tianxing had already given him a piece of golden paper. Not only did it contain the vassals of the Ling people, but it also contained the division of the 9 states. Ling Xiao's first destination was the Cloud State, which was located to the west of the 9 states. That was because the Su family was there. Ling Xiao needed to complete this chessboard and find Huang Mingxi before he could have the time to look for other prodigies and destinies. Do you want to come with me? Or do you want to train on your own? The 9 states wasn't very big, but it was similar to the Azure territory. However, it was small, but it included thousands of sects and hundreds of millions of cultivators. Especially now, the originally barren territory was suddenly filled with spiritual energy. It was inevitable that some peerless prodigies would appear. This was a trial. In other words, it was a place of fortune for those who also possess karmic luck. Sir, I won't be going with you. Ning Chuan's expression was indifferent, but his eyes were filled with battle intent. In the lower realm, the most powerful cultivators were only in the Saint realm. For someone at the peak of the exalted realm like him, they were the most suitable opponents. Right now, Ning Chuan couldn't wait to sweep across the world and slaughter everyone. What about you? Ling Xiao wasn't surprised by Ning Chuan's decision. At the end of the day, he didn't follow him for protection, but for the right to kill. Brother, I want to go with Sister Rouge and Sister Huahua. Baizishi tugged at Phoenix Rouge and Huahua's arms. Her pink eyes were pleading. With her personality, it wasn't easy for her to come to the lower realm. Naturally, she wanted to seize the opportunity to fill her cup. She didn't have to worry about following Ling Xiao, but it wasn't her turn to fill her cup. All right, Huahua, Rouge, you two go with Jishi. Ling Xiao nodded. Then, he led Xinyuan Weiyang and Yi Qingchan to the west. Chapter 1424. Yeah, Sister Rouge, Sister Huahua, let's get high, woohoo. Baijishi's cheers came from afar. Obviously, with her cultivation level, she could only be a yes man in the azure world. But in the lower realm, she was the top demon. As for the descendants of the ancient sects from the upper realm, they dared not to give face to her brother Ling Xiao. So, with the recovery of the spirit Qi, I, Baijishi, am invincible. Master, where are we going now? Yi Qingchan's jade-like hand wrapped around Ling Xiao's arm, and there was a bright smile on her pretty face. This scene made Xinyuan Weiyang's mouth slightly open. He was obviously surprised. Just now, Yi Qingchan had sealed the sky with a single thought, as cold as the fairy of the ninth heaven. But now, in front of Master, she was like a completely different person. She was like a sister next door, gentle and lively, and even a little childish. These two completely opposite temperaments really made it hard for one to react in time. Let's go to Yinzhou. Yenner is there. Ling Xiao smiled gently. With Phoenix Rouge and Huahua, even if Baijishi got into trouble, she wouldn't be in too much danger. Moreover, the luck of the three of them might not be higher than all the people in the lower realm, but it was enough to crush most of the people in the lower realm. So, Ling Xiao didn't have to worry about their safety. Before leaving, Ling Xiao received a letter from Huang Mingxi, saying that there was a direct descendant of the Su family in the world of souls. Before meeting Su Luan, Ling Xiao did need Huang Mingxi's help to arrange for Su Yin to enter the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance. But now, it seemed that the role of the young master of the Hua family was dispensable. So, sometimes, a person's value didn't depend on himself, but also the role you play. When your role was insignificant, no matter how good you were, you could only be a sacrifice. You know, Su Yin? Yi Qingchan's beautiful eyes narrowed, and the smile on her face grew wider. It seemed that the lower realm was already in Master's plan. Let's go. Ling Xiao waved his hand and summoned the 9 dragons' golden carriage. He carried Yi Qingchan and Xinyuan Weiyang on it and flew away. Qingchan, what have you gained this year? Young master, I fused with an immortal origin. Yi Qingchan smiled mysteriously as her eyes surged with spiritual light. Even her aura seemed to possess a transcendent aura. Oh, immortal source? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and nodded. With the identity of the Foliaceae, it was not surprising that the inheritance of the ancestral land was an immortal source. Amen. According to the fallen old ancestors of the Foliaceae, fusing with the immortal source would allow one to trample over paragons, unstoppable by the world. In fact, the higher one's cultivation level, the more terrifying the power of the immortal source would be. Yi Qingchan suddenly leaned over and lay in Ling Xiao's arms. Her bright eyes trembled like a pool of green waves. Young master, Ling Xiao looked at Xinyuan Weiyang a little awkwardly. Although this silly girl had submitted to him, she was still a little reserved when it came to matters between men and women. Yi Qingchan probably thought that this 1 year was enough for this Xinyuan princess to throw herself into Ling Xiao's arms and become his woman. Therefore, she did not have any scruples. Seeing the expression on Ling Xiao's face, Yi Qingchan's eyes trembled slightly. She immediately rubbed against Ling Xiao like a spoiled child, but did not act presumptuously again. Only Xinyuan Weiyang blushed. She lowered her head and rubbed her hands, looking particularly shy. Sister Qingchan, you are really brave. Unlike me, I only secretly feel sorry for young master and never dare to deliberately show it. At the same time, at the entrance, countless figures stepped on the peak of the sky and then rushed in all directions at extreme speed. Among them, several stage fluctuations attracted countless spies in this world. Young master, where are we going now? It was not until the figures of the crowd were far away that a few young men walked over from the sky. The leader was the young man in blue who was full of luck. Before I came to the mortal world, Master once said that there was an ancestor in my sect who was banished to this world of dead souls. After so many years with the strength of the ancestor, it is impossible for him to be unknown. Perhaps he has already left behind his legacy. The young man in blue's eyes rippled with murderous intent. That Ling Xiao. Since I am here, he will naturally have to pay the price for what he did before. This is not the Azure world. There is no one to support him. The young man in blue sneered. Compared to Ling Xiao, he was more interested in the transformed dragon girl. He could feel that the bloodline in this dragon was extremely ancient and powerful. If he could take it under his wing, his strength would be at the top of the generation. Yes. Hearing this, a smile appeared on everyone's face, and they turned and walked into the distance. The world was silent. It was not until half a day later that the entrance bloomed with spiritual light again. A figure with a straight body and full of sword intent stepped on the peak of the sky like the tip of a sword. There were faint wisps of purple chi on his body, mysterious and vast. Then, he first looked up at the sky before taking a step and disappearing on the spot. Cloud State border. In front of an ancient city, Ling Xiao, Yi Qingchan, and Xinyuan Weiyang walked side by side. Although Ling Xiao knew the approximate location of the Su family, the Cloud State was thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. Who knew where the Su family was located? However, just as the three of them walked to the gate of the ancient city, a look of surprise appeared on their faces. At this moment, a thick smell of blood filled the air from the city. Spiritual power spread out, and there were faint cries from afar. Whoosh! In front of the city gate, a thin figure rushed out. Her delicate little face was filled with panic. Behind her, several figures in black robes chased closely. Spiritual power spread out from their bodies. The spirit treasures in their hands slashed out and were about to kill the girl on the spot. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed. Beside him, Yi Qingchan's face was cold. She took a step forward and blocked in front of the girl. On the other hand, the four spiritual treasures that were falling from the sky suddenly froze in the void. Even the spiritual light that was blooming on them was annihilated in an instant. Little girl. Ling Xiao reached out and blocked the escaping girl in front of him. He squatted down and smiled gently. Did you meet a bad person? Run. They are disciples of the blood demon sect. They are demons. The girl was at most 14 or 15 years old. Her small face was delicate and cute. But at this moment, her eyes were filled with fear and despair that came from the depths of her heart. Oh, disciples of the blood demon sect? Ling Xiao smiled and rubbed her head. How about this? If you answer a few of my questions, I will help you chase these bad people away. How about that? Big brother, aren't you from the Cloud State? You don't even know about the blood demon sect? It's okay. Big brother is very powerful. Ling Xiao looked indifferent. He did not care about the four figures that were coming from afar. Do you know about the Su family? The Su family? The girl was stunned. You mean the Su family of the Yongchang Chamber of Commerce? That's right. It's the Su family. Where's their place? I am from the Su family. My name is Su Meng. I am a disciple of the Su family side branch. The Su family's place is in Misty Cloud City. Su Meng did not hide anything. After all, this information was known to everyone in the Cloud State. She was just curious about where this immortal-like big brother came from and why he wanted to know where the Su family was. Oh, you are from the Su family? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He stood up and looked at the four black-clothed youths. Isn't this a coincidence? You blind thing. How dare you interfere with our blood demon sex business? One of the youths shouted angrily. Just as he was about to raise his hand and wave it at Yi Qingchan, he felt a chill spreading from the bottom of his feet. Before he could react, he and the three people behind him were covered in ice crystals. They lost all signs of life. Chapter 1425. Su Meng, what happened in the city? Ling Xiao asked softly as he lowered his head and looked at the young girl who had a dazed expression with her mouth wide open. Brother, brother immortal, please save the Su family. Su Meng knelt on the ground and cried bitterly. Today, the blood demon sex experts suddenly came to my family and forced my father to hand over the family's treasures. My father refused, so they took action to snatch them. Just now, I secretly sent a voice transmission to Sister Su Yin when they weren't paying attention, but she said something happened in Misty City as well. Oh, Ling Zhao's eyes turned cold as he nodded slightly. Let's go. With that, he directly grabbed Su Meng's jade-like hand and flew into the city. Behind him, Yi Qingchan and Xinyuan Weiyang's faces were cold. Clearly, they also wanted to kill. Boom, boom. Above the ancient city, spiritual light surged. In front of a large hall in the city, two forces were fighting fiercely. A group of black-clothed experts clearly had the upper hand. When their treasures fell, they could kill many creatures. Father, Su Meng exclaimed. She broke free from Ling Zhao's hand and descended from the sky. In the crowd, a middle-aged man in a brown robe with a dignified appearance narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. Menger, why are you back? Father, our Su family is saved. Su Meng looked up at the sky and saw three figures standing there quietly with a sense of transcendence. We were saved? With the Su family's strength, it was naturally impossible for them to detect Ling Xiao and the other two's cultivation. However, looking at the three's age, they were at most 30 years old. How could they be a match for this group of blood demon sect experts? Ha! Little girl, have you called for reinforcements? In the blood demon sect, a white-haired old man smiled sinisterly and suddenly raised his hand to stop everyone's attack. Then, he turned his head and looked at Ling Xiao and the other two with a mocking expression. The smile on his face suddenly froze. As the only ninth-grade exalted realm expert here, his strength was enough to crush many sects and forces. However, for some reason, when he looked at the three young men and women in front of him, he actually felt a sense of trepidation. Cloud State was tens of thousands of miles away from the entrance to the upper realm. Therefore, the news of them descending to the lower realm had yet to reach these people's ears. Of course, even so, the divine radiance at the entrance had already illuminated the 9 provinces, and this expert from the blood demon sect had vaguely guessed some things. This was especially true for the three of them. Although they did not emit any aura, the noble and transcendent aura they exuded was simply impossible to conceal. The three of you, I am Xueqi. May I know which sect you three are from? Why are you interfering in the matters of my blood demon sect? Who sent you? Ling Xiao said indifferently, like a god overlooking the common people. It was as if, in his eyes, these disciples and experts of the blood demon sect were simply ants. They didn't have the slightest bit of power to speak of. However, the blood demon sect did not make a move earlier or later. Instead, they chose to make a move when everyone was in the lower realm. It was obvious that there was someone supporting them from behind, and this person was most likely from the upper realm. The blood demon sect's actions were probably to gather spiritual treasures and spiritual materials to show their filial piety to this person from the upper realm. And even if they caused a disaster, there would be someone to support them. It was absolutely safe. Everyone from the Su family was stunned. There was an obvious flash of fear in their eyes. They could not understand why the blood demon sect, which had always been arrogant and despotic, would suddenly cower. They also could not figure out the identity of this young man. How dare he speak to an elder of the blood demon sect like this? Young man, there are some things that you'd better not worry about. No matter what your identity is, I can only say that there are some people you can't afford to offend. Xueqi's tone was slightly unyielding. The bloody radiance on his body fluctuated like a bloody storm, causing people to feel fear. However, the moment he finished speaking, the sound of swords suddenly rang out in the sky. Ancient swords flickered with 7-colored radiance as they slashed down furiously like a torrent. Xueqi's expression froze. His eyes were filled with fear. He pushed out with both hands, forming a blood seal that was 100 feet long, trying to stop the sword momentum. With his experience, it was naturally difficult for him to recognize that these 100 ancient swords were all divine artifacts that were rarely seen in the entire world of souls. It could only be said that the ignorant were fearless. Boom! The moment the two attacks collided, a trace of paleness and fear appeared on Xueqi's face. The 100 swords slashed the blood seal into pieces in an instant. Then, they pierced through the sky with a force that could cut through the sky. No, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Instantly, Xueqi's figure was enveloped by the radiance of the swords. Even the dozens of blood demon sect disciples standing beside him were pierced by the 100 swords and slashed into nothingness. Blood rained down. Ling Xiao looked down indifferently. He glanced at Su Meng, then turned and walked toward the horizon. Sword immortal. The entire Su family was dead silent. It was only after a long while that there was an uproar. There were many legends about the sword immortal in the world. However, they never dreamed that the sword immortal would come to the world and kill the evil with a single sword just as their bloodline was about to be destroyed. Thank you, sword immortal. Thank you, sword immortal. Countless members of the Su family knelt on the ground and cheered. That peerless black-clothed figure had become an indelible totem in the hearts of many young men and women. Meng, where did you invite this sword immortal from? I don't know. I met Big Brother Immortal at the city gate. Su Meng stood rooted to the ground, her lips trembling. This scene shocked her too much. Many years later, this girl from the Su family side branch was still fascinated by the figure in her heart. She was unmatched in her life. Young master, do you want me to go to the blood demon sect and find out the person behind them? Thousands of miles in the sky, a dragon carriage pressed down on the world. Yiqing Chan's icy eyes were cold. She naturally guessed Ling Xiao's thoughts. As a merchant alliance, the Su family must have controlled the huge wealth of the Cloud Prefecture and even the entire 9 prefectures. Robbing this clan was much easier than searching for a secret realm. No need. Give them some more time. Ling Xiao smiled gently, but Yiqing Chan's beautiful eyes narrowed. The corner of her mouth also raised into a smile. Xinyuan Weiyong looked at the two of them in surprise. He frowned slightly, and there seemed to be a lot of question marks on his little head. Give them some more time? Young master, give them some more time. If they find helpers, won't it be more troublesome? Dong! Ling Xiao stretched out his hand and gently flicked Xinyuan Weiyong's forehead. Little fool, if we don't give them time, how can we catch them all in one fell swoop? If we don't remove the roots, it will be a disaster. Oh, young master's thoughts are so meticulous. Weiyong is too one-sided. Xinyuan Weiyong rubbed his forehead, stuck out his tongue, and nodded with a look of realization. Uffed! Seeing this, Yiqing Chan finally couldn't help but laugh. This girl is really silly to the point of being cute. It has been a year, but she still doesn't understand young master's style of doing things. Give the blood demon sect some time, and they will be able to snatch more spiritual treasures. At that time, young master will descend and be the light of the righteous path to eliminate demons and protect the righteous path. Chapter 1426. Cloud Mist Ancient City, the center of Cloud Prefecture. This city was the most majestic and luxurious ancient city in Cloud Prefecture. The world of dead souls was different from Shengzhou and Azure World. Most of the ancestors of the ancient sects and clans here were expelled from the upper realm and were suppressed here. Those with a long heritage or clans from the upper realm mostly occupied the places with the densest spirit qi in the world of dead souls. For example, although the Su family was forced to come to the lower realm, they still brought a lot of spirit stones and treasures with them. Moreover, the Su family had always been good at business. Therefore, in a few years, they controlled the financial power of Cloud Prefecture and became the wealthiest clan. Although Su Luan and the other supremes did not come to the lower realm, the Su family still had a 6th grade Sage Realm ancestor and 2 Sage Realm elders. At the end of the day, without strength, even if the Su family accumulated wealth, it would only be a waste of effort and it would be in vain. However, The Sioux family today was not as peaceful and wealthy as before. In the sky above the Sioux family, a figure with a terrifying aura stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the people below. Blood Demon Sect, Dark Crow Sect. May I know why the elders of the two sects have come to my Sioux family? The Sioux family master was called Sioux Kai. He was a middle-aged man of 8th grade supremacy realm. Behind him, the two saints looked gloomy. Their auras surged, and they were ready to attack. Ha! Sioux Kai, your Sioux family has occupied the wealth of Cloud Prefecture for thousands of years. Now that the spirit Chi has recovered, the other provinces have been conquering. We plan to lend you some spirit treasures and Dharma artifacts to suppress the enemies. The Blood Demon Sect elder was called Shwe Senator. He was a white-haired old man. His holy will fell and turned into a sea of blood. If it was in the past, he would not dare to provoke the Sioux family. However, now that the entrance between the world of dead souls and the upper realm had reopened, the Blood Demon Sect's backer was about to descend. A small clan from a lower realm could not be destroyed with a wave of the hand. It could be crushed at will. Borrow spirit treasures? Sioux Kai frowned slightly, and his eyes became gloomier. That's right. I heard that the Sioux clan has a divine weapon that was passed down from the upper realm. Why don't you lend this divine weapon to us temporarily? When this calamity is over, I will return it to the Sioux clan. How about that? The elder of the Dark Crow tribe laughed sinisterly, revealing his yellow teeth. At this moment, his eyes were not on Sioux Kai, but on the depths of the Sioux clan. Compared to the two sage realm elders in front of them, the two of them were more afraid of the Sioux family's 6th grade sage realm ancestor. How dare you? Shwe-san, Inbo, you'd better not go too far. Sioux Kai's eyes were like torches, but there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Although these two sects joining hands was indeed not something that the Sioux family could contend against. However, if they wanted to destroy the Sioux family, they would definitely have to pay an extremely painful price. Especially in the hands of the Sioux family. They had a saint artifact with unparalleled power. One had to know that in the lower realm, the value of a saint weapon was immeasurable. Although there were many clans from the upper realm in this realm, most of them had been suppressed and massacred before they descended. Having 1 or 2 saint artifacts was the true strength of a clan. Over the years, the Sioux family had relied on the accumulation of spiritual stones to produce many Emperor God experts. If they really wanted to fight, the Sioux family was not afraid. Ha 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 ha, Sioux Kai, it seems like you still don't understand the situation. Shwe-san and Inbo looked at each other, and a trace of coldness appeared in the depths of their eyes. Then, the two of them waved their hands, and many figures appeared in the distant sky. The two people in the lead had also reached the sage realm. This is Sioux Kai's face darkened. He had a feeling that things were not as simple as he thought. Ha ha, Master Sioux, let me introduce you. These two are the masters of the Ghost King sect and Luosha sect. Ghost King Duan Ming and Luosha sect Master Shangwan Feiyun. Shwe-san sneered and looked at Sioux Kai with a playful gaze. The Sioux family had a 6th grade sage realm ancestor, but it was said that this person had not appeared in the world for a long time. It was said that when the Sioux family descended to the world of souls, this ancestor was suspected to have been shot down from the sky and was severely injured. So many years had passed, and Shwe-san and the others did not know if this ancestor had recovered from his injuries. However, his combat power as a 6th grade sage was probably not as strong as it used to be. You, Sioux Kai gritted his teeth and turned to look at the two sage realm elders. At this moment, the two of them also looked extremely gloomy. Obviously, these two heterodox sect masters from the Thunder Continent had terrifying cultivations. What do you think, Master Sioux? Hand over the spiritual treasure, and we'll leave immediately. We won't hurt anyone in the Sioux family. Shwe-san and the others stood in the sky and looked coldly at the Sioux family below. The world of souls was now a mixed bag of good and bad people, but the truly powerful sects were all related to the upper world. Behind the Blood Demon Force sects was a true top force in the upper world. This time, they came to snatch the Sioux family's spiritual treasure because they wanted to hand over the treasure and express their sincerity before the lords from the upper world descended. How dare you? However, just as Su Kai and the others were hesitating, the figure of an old man suddenly rose into the sky from the backyard of the Su family. A terrifying spiritual power descended. A golden cauldron covered heaven and earth, suppressing Shue's sun and the others on the spot. Golden light splashed and rays of light shot out. At this moment, everyone could see that the moment the golden cauldron fell, the void shattered into pieces of ice crystals. It was too terrifying. The power of a divine artifact was not something these lower world cultivators could contend against. Therefore, in the land of the 9 provinces, any sect that had a divine artifact inheritance was a true top force. Ha, you're finally out? But before the cauldron fell, a cold laugh came from the void again. Immediately after, a figure surrounded by black fog stepped down from the sky. A pair of ghost-like hands pushed down and directly imprinted on the golden cauldron. Clang! The sound of the impact echoed for thousands of miles. The figure covered in black fog immediately retreated 100 feet before stabilizing himself. The glow on the golden cauldron also quietly dimmed at this moment. Together with the figure that leaped up, it fell to the ground. Pucci! The old man staggered a few steps and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His old eyes were filled with sorrow. Ancestor! A group of Su family experts immediately gathered around with a nervous look on their faces. It's all right. The ancestor of the Su family sighed softly and looked up at the 5 saints above him. His old face suddenly flashed with a touch of determination. Are you all determined to take away the foundation of the Su family? Ha, Ancestor Qingshan, what are you saying? You're so direct. That's right. We want to take away the foundation of the Su family. Shue's son and the others looked at each other and smiled. They no longer had any worries. Sure enough, as they had guessed, the cultivation of the ancestor of the Su family was no longer the same as before. Even with a divine artifact in hand, he could only fight to a draw with the Dark Crow sect master. As such, there was nothing to worry about. Chapter 14:27. Everyone, the Su family can take out this sage weapon. Why don't we both take a step back? Su Qingshan hesitated for a moment before making a decision. With his current combat strength, it would be difficult for him to fight against 2 sage stage cultivators. Once the 4 sects took action today, the Su family would be wiped out. Ha! Ancestor, you're joking. Do you think the Su family has any room to bargain now? Shue's son shook his head and smiled. His eyes were full of sarcasm. Just now, he deliberately tricked the Su family into handing over the sage weapon. In fact, he did not intend to let the Su family go. He just wanted to reduce the casualties. Today, the 4 sects came to destroy the Su family and capture the Su family's young master, Su Yan, and offer her to the lords in the upper world. In this year, Su Yan's name was known throughout the 9 states. It was said that this girl was a direct descendant of the Su family who was stranded in Qingzhou. After returning to the Su family for a month, she suppressed the original young master of the Su family and became the new leader of the younger generation. Of course, there was no doubt about this girl's talent. However, what really made her famous in the 9 states was her beauty and her attainments in alchemy. It was said that this girl had personally refined a 6th grade pill and successfully entered the supremacy stage. In the lower realm, this could be considered a miracle. Then tell me, what do you want? Su Qingshan's eyes were gloomy, but he did not dare to act rashly. It was obvious that Shue's son and the others came with a premeditated plan. Now that the leaders of the 3 sects had appeared, only the Blood Demon sect master had not appeared. No one knew whether this demon, whose name was known throughout Yinzhou, was hiding in the dark and waiting for an opportunity to take action. It's very simple. We want all the spirit stones, spirit materials, and young master Su Yan in the Su family's treasury. Shuesen's gaze swept past the group of Su family disciples and finally stopped on a graceful figure in white. Hearing that, Su Yan frowned slightly and her eyes darkened. What? Su Qingshan was stunned. He was about to fly into a rage when he heard a soft voice beside him. Ancestor, if we don't do as they say today, the Su family will be destroyed. Suyu. Su Qingshan turned his head and looked at the golden-robed girl beside him. Before he could say anything, the girl said angrily, "It doesn't matter if we die, but the blood feud and injustice of our bloodline will be completely buried." Suddenly, Su Qingshan hesitated. That's right, it didn't matter if they died, but the humiliation and infamy that their bloodline had to bear would be difficult to wash away. As the true descendant of the Su family in the upper world, Su Qingshan and the others had been thinking about returning to the Azure continent, to their ancestral land. Now, a single choice could completely ruin the entire Su family, so they had to be careful. The great Grandmaster of Green Mountain, what do you think? Have you thought it through? Patriarch, do you think that with how treacherous these people are, they will let us go even if we hand over the sacred artifact and numinous treasure? At this moment, Su Yin suddenly shook her head and chuckled. Flames seemed to be dancing in her eyes. Now, the Su family can only fight to the death. Perhaps only then will they have a chance of survival. Yin-er. Su Qingshan's brows were tightly knitted, and his eyes were filled with concentration. Su Yan's words were not without reason. With how treacherous Shue's son and the others were, even if the Su family handed over the numinous treasure, they would not be able to escape the fate of destruction. However, the Su family did not have the slightest chance of winning this battle. If they fought, they would not be able to escape destruction. Su Kai. Suddenly, Su Qingshan seemed to have made a decision in his heart. He raised his head and looked at the 5 Sage Realm cultivators and the many evil cultivators in the sky. Patriarch, later, Elder Su Sun and I will try our best to stop them. You take the children and leave. Now that the 9 states was in turmoil, thousands of sects and clans would not be able to escape this calamity. The Su family had been running businesses all these years and had allies all over Yinzhou. As long as Su Kai could save the lives of Su Yin and the others, the Su family's inheritance would not be broken. Yes, Patriarch. Su Kai's eyes trembled, but in the end, he did not say anything and gradually clenched his fists. Haha, Su Qingshan, don't think that I don't know what you are planning. Do you really think that we will give the Su family a chance to escape today? Shuesan smiled disdainfully and turned to look at the Dark Crow sect that was covered in ghost fog. Sect Master, leave it to me. The Sect Master of the Dark Crow sect nodded slightly and changed his hand seals. Wisps of underworld aura spread out in all directions like shackles that sealed heaven and earth and directly enveloped the entire Su family. Oh no! Su Qingshan shouted angrily, and the spiritual light around him suddenly surged. The golden cauldron lit up again and shot up into the sky, colliding with the underworld aura with a loud bang. Chirp! However, at this moment, the tens of thousands of strands of yin qi suddenly gathered together and transformed into the shadow of a dark crow. Its scarlet eyes shone with a fierce light as it stretched out its claws and grabbed the golden cauldron in the air. Boom! The heaven and earth shook and the underworld aura suddenly shattered. However, with Su Qingshan's current strength, even if he controlled the divine artifact, he could not break the Dark Crow's barrier in a short time. His old face suddenly turned pale. Since Patriarch Qingshan is so stubborn, don't blame us for being ruthless. Everyone, let's do it. Shuesan stood proudly in the air and sneered. In the next moment, he suddenly waved his hand, and the eyes of the disciples of the Devil's sect flashed with endless killing intent. But, just as everyone was about to make a move, a lazy and casual voice sounded from the backyard of the Su family. Oh, what's going on? Hearing the voice, not only was Shuesan and the rest stunned, but even the people of the Su family had a look of surprise in their eyes. Soon after, a delicate and handsome young man in cotton clothes slowly walked over. There was still a trace of sleepiness on his face, but his eyes were incomparably bright, calm, and indifferent. Yin Sun. Su Kai frowned slightly and was obviously surprised. He really did not expect that this good-for-nothing young master, who seemed to have no cultivation and only knew how to admire flowers and fish all day long, would actually appear at this moment. Speaking of Yin Sun, the disciples of the Su family all felt resentful. That day, he suddenly visited the Su family and took out a marriage contract. Since then, he had stayed in the Su family for half a year. And this marriage contract was not forged. It was set by an elder of Yin Sun when Su Qingshan was heavily injured and descended to the death world. It was said that at that time, Su Qingshan was beaten down to the lower world and was on the verge of death. Coincidentally, he was saved by an elder of Yin Sun and swore that he would repay him in the future. At that time, Su Kai's partner was already pregnant, and the Su family had just arrived and wanted to rely on a lower world force to gain a firm foothold. Su Qingshan saw that the expert of the Yin family had a terrifying cultivation and was proficient in the art of alchemy, so he set up this marriage contract with him. No matter when the Yin family took out the marriage contract, he could become the partner of the Su family's young master and live and die together. But Su Qingshan never dreamed that the expert of the Yin family would disappear without a trace and never appear again. And the Su family relied on their foundation and brains to establish the merchant union and develop it until now. At this moment, Yin Sun suddenly came and took out the marriage contract and asked the Su family to fulfill it. Chapter 1428. To be honest, both Su Kai and Su Qingshan were annoyed by Yin Sun. In other words, there was no one in the Su family who didn't hate this idle young master of the Yin family. When the Su family was in dire straits, the Yin family didn't have any experts to help them. Now that the Su family had a deep foundation and the wealth of Yinzhou, this young master of the Yin family suddenly came and wanted to fulfill the marriage agreement. What kind of behavior was this? This wasn't as simple as tricking the monkey of the Su family. This was purely tricking a white wolf without risking anything. More importantly, the Su family didn't hear of any ancient family surnamed Yin in the 9 prefectures. If this Yin Sun was extremely talented, he could enter the Su family as a son-in-law and contribute to the Su family. But this person was a piece of trash who didn't even have a bit of spirit energy, let alone cultivation. Although Su Yin had been wandering outside for a long time, ever since she returned to the Su family, she displayed a shocking business mind and cultivation talent. Now that the world of souls had undergone a huge change and spiritual energy was recovering, all the sects and clans were looking forward to a person blessed by the heavens to lead their sect to the peak of the 9 prefectures and even to the upper realm. Su Kai and the elders of the Su family made a prompt decision to use a fair competition as a prelude to cripple the former young master of the Su family, Su Yu, and make Su Yin the new young master of the Su family. They hoped that this girl's talent could bring the Su family to another height. But Yin Sun suddenly came and took out the marriage agreement. Although this action was extremely shameless, it was reasonable. Even Su Qingshan couldn't find an excuse to reject this matter. But if Yin Sun chose an ordinary girl, Su Kai and the others could reluctantly agree. But he took a fancy to Su Yin and said that he would marry no one but Su Yin. He was even willing to marry into the Su family. Su Yin was extremely resistant to this matter and didn't give Yin Sun a chance. As a result, this matter was completely delayed and Yin Sun naturally stayed in the Su family. He spent his days idling around, eating and drinking, waiting for the Su family to give him a reply. Today, when the Blood Demon sect and the other sects surrounded the Su family, everyone thought that this trash had already slipped away. Who would have thought that he actually had some guts to stand out at such a crucial moment? Of course, looking at his sleepy face, they didn't exclude the possibility that he was in a daze. "Kid, who are you?" Shui-san and the others, who were about to attack, froze on the spot. Their eyes were filled with shock. At this moment, they could all feel that this plain-clothed youth did not have the slightest fluctuation of spiritual power, as if he was a cripple. However, how could a cripple have such brilliance in his eyes? Furthermore, Shui-san and the others had an illusion that this young man's gaze seemed to be somewhat sarcastic. "Master of the Su family, Ancestor Qingshan, what do you think of my engagement with Yin?" Yin Sun stood in front of the crowd with an indifferent expression on his face. At this moment, the sleepiness on his face had long since dissipated and was replaced by a gentle smile. Nephew Yin Sun, my Su clan suddenly met with a calamity. Su Kai and Su Qingshan looked at each other, their faces filled with doubt and surprise. If Yin Sun wasn't a fool, then his current attitude meant that he had something to rely on. Could it be that this fellow had always been pretending to be trash? It's just a few heretical demons. Yin Sun gave a carefree smile. His determined face had a domineering aura that looked down on everyone. Shui Sun and the others' faces darkened, but they didn't dare to act rashly. Yin if you agree to marry me today, I will solve this calamity for your Su clan. Yin Sun stood upright with his hands behind his back. He looked at Su Yin with deep affection in his eyes. Back then, when he came to the Su clan with injuries all over his body, it was this young lady who kindly gave him a pill. Although it was just a third-grade pill, it made Yin Sun feel incomparably warm. Moreover, from the first time he saw Su Yin, he could feel the aura of the spiritual fire on her. To be able to fuse with the spiritual fire of heaven and earth, her talent was unprecedented, and only such a girl was worthy of him. Initially, Yin Sun didn't come to the Su clan to complete the engagement. He wanted to make use of the Su clan's power and resources to achieve some goals as soon as possible. But Su Yan's kindness and talent really surprised him, and it was his other gain from this trip. You don't know what's good for you. Do you really think you can scare us? Shui Sun and the others looked at each other. The moment they stepped forward, the bloody glow in their hands suddenly brightened. Clang! But, just as everyone's attack was about to land, something suddenly fell out of Yin Sun's arms. Everyone's expression froze again. They lowered their heads to look at the golden ancient token on the ground and the two words Saint Emperor on it. Their eyes suddenly narrowed, especially Shui Sun, the Dark Crow sect master, and the Rakshasa sect master, who were natives of the Death World. A trace of shock and disbelief flashed in their eyes. This is Saint Emperor's token. Saint Emperor's token. The entire world suddenly fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at the figure who bent down to pick up the ancient token with a trace of disbelief in their eyes. In the land of the 9 prefectures, only one force had reached the peak of the world in 100,000 years. The Saint Emperor Palace. The Saint Emperor was invincible and dominated his generation. All the experts and sects who went against the Saint Emperor eventually fell under the iron guards of the Saint Emperor Palace. But, back then, the Saint Emperor was extremely talented and had reached the peak of the Saint realm at the age of 1,000. In the end, the Saint Emperor broke through the barrier of space with his own strength and ascended. He never appeared again. After another 1,000 years, the experts who followed the Saint Emperor finally fell apart and established their own sects and forces. Among them, 3 sects had successfully reached the peak of the 9 prefectures and were extremely prosperous. Although these 3 sects were far from comparable to the Saint Emperor Palace, they still controlled tens of thousands of miles of land and were revered by others. The 2 words Saint Emperor slowly disappeared from everyone's sight and had not been mentioned for a long time. But how could it be? How could this young man have the Saint Emperor's token, which symbolized the authority of the Saint Emperor? Yin, if you're willing to marry me, no one in the Su clan will be able to bully you in the future. Yin Sun's expression was indifferent as he put the ancient token back into his arms. His eyes were extremely gentle. I've said before, I already have someone in my heart. You should stop dreaming. Su Yin frowned slightly. She did not feel inferior because of Yin Sun's identity. But, just as she finished speaking, the head of the Su clan, Su Kai, who had always doted on her, suddenly shouted coldly, Yin, don't be rude. At this moment, he was also somewhat puzzled as to why this young man had the Saint Emperor's token. But if he was really related to the Saint Emperor, he would definitely stand at the peak of the 9 prefectures once again. Even if he was a trash, he was not someone that the Blood Demon sect could provoke. Saint Emperor? Su Yu's eyes trembled as she covered her red lips with her jade-like hands. Previously, She was rejoicing that she was no longer the young master of the Su clan. Otherwise, she would be forced to marry this trash. Furthermore, back then, the old ancestor had also intended for her to replace Su Yin in completing the marriage, but she had sternly rejected him. Suddenly, endless regret gushed out from the bottom of Su Yu's heart. If this young man was really the saint emperor who was famous in the 9 prefectures thousands of years ago, if she married him, wouldn't she be the saint empress? Chapter 1429. I see. But Yin, now that the Su family is in trouble, where is your sweetheart? Yin Sun shook his head and smiled. He felt that Su Yin was a good match for him. If he revealed his identity, this girl's attitude would change, and he would be looked down upon. No matter where he is, you should just give up. Compared to him, you're not even an ant. Su Yin was calm and didn't waver. She didn't care whether the Su family was destroyed or not. She had many treasures that the young master gave her. It was impossible for a few fake sages to kill her. But if she left, it would affect the young master's plans. Hence, Su Yin wouldn't abandon the Su family unless she had no other choice. How dare you? Su Yin, you are really audacious. How dare you speak to the sacred emperor like this? Su Yu reprimanded and walked towards Yin Sun. She bowed and said, Young Master Yin, I am the young master of the Su family. Now that the Su family is in trouble, how can I bear to see the Su family destroyed? Hence, if you don't mind, I am willing to marry you and complete the marriage agreement. I only ask that you protect the Su family. At this time, Su Yu was righteous and stern without the slightest greed, but there was a bit of a self-sacrificing posture. Haha, Miss Su Yu, you're mistaken. I don't want to marry the young master of the Su family. I want to marry Su Yin. Yin Sun smiled and instantly caused Su Yu's face to turn pale. There was a faint trace of resentment in his eyes. Yin, to be able to marry young Master Yin is an honor for you and the Su family. This matter is settled. Tomorrow, the Su family will invite all the major clans in the Yunzhou to hold a wedding ceremony for you and young Master Yin. Su Kai said indifferently. Being able to form an alliance with the Sacred Emperor Palace was beneficial to the Su family. Although the Su family had never seen the power of the Sacred Emperor Palace, the title of the Master of the 9 States was enough to explain everything. The Sacred Emperor token was always in the hands of the Sacred Emperor. In other words, Yin Sun was either the Sacred Emperor himself or his successor. I said, I will not marry him even if I die. Su Yin shook her head, and there wasn't much emotion on her face. A mere person from the lower realm, not to mention being compared to the young master, did not even have the qualifications to be mentioned in the same breath. If the Su family forced her, she wouldn't mind letting them have a taste of burning the sky. Nonsense. Do you think you could decide the marriage? Su Kai coldly snorted, then turned to Yin Sun and said, Young Master Yin, this matter is settled. Don't worry, as long as today's disaster is over, I will personally arrange the marriage between you and Yin. If the head of the family says so, then Su Yin will withdraw from the Su family today and have nothing to do with the Su family. Su Yan's eyes were cold. He reached out and untied the clan token that represented the identity of the young master from his waist and handed it back to Su Yu. Since you want to get married so much, you can get married. You. Su Yu's pretty face turned cold as she snatched the clan badge away. This originally belonged to me. Hee, young master and ancestor Qingshan, I think you two should stop arguing. Since Miss Su Yin is unwilling to marry, then let us take her away. I promise to find a better husband for Miss Su Yin. Shue's son and the others laughed eerily, and the shock on their faces had already disappeared. If the Holy Emperor Yin had returned a year earlier, they wouldn't have dared to be so presumptuous and make an enemy out of him. But now that the entrance to the world of dead souls had appeared, many of the young master's descendants from the upper world were about to descend. Not to mention that the Holy Emperor Palace no longer existed. Even if it was at its peak, how could it compete with the experts and forces of the upper world? Presumptuous. Yin Sun's eyes turned cold as he looked up at Shue's son and the others. How dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Hee. So you are the Holy Emperor? Unfortunately, the Nine States is no longer in the era of the Holy Emperor. Is that so? Seems like I have been quiet for too long. Yinsun shook his head and smiled bitterly. Then he held the Holy Emperor token in his hand and looked up at the sky. I wonder how many people in the Nine States still remember their former Holy Emperor? Buzz. As soon as Yin Sun finished speaking, the Holy Emperor token suddenly emitted a golden light. Endless Taoist rhymes gushed out and turned into a golden door that stood in the sky. Countless powerful and ancient auras filled the air. Many figures seemed to have gathered from thousands of divine worlds and were about to step out of the door and descend under the Holy Emperor's authority. This is the eyes of Shue's son, and the others turned cold as they trembled. It was rumored that once the Holy Emperor token was issued, 100,000 holy guards would gather from all over the Nine States and listen to the Holy Emperor's orders. Now that thousands of years had passed, no one knew where the 100,000 holy guards were. However, it was obvious that this was a force that could shake the Nine States. Elder Shui, why don't we strategically retreat first? The Rakshasa Daelord's eyes darkened. He seemed to be intimidated by the golden light. Yes, there was someone behind them. It was a big shot from the upper world. However, no one dared to challenge the Holy Emperor's authority. Once the 100,000 holy guards descended, it would be difficult for them to fight head-on. Anyway, the Su family could not run away. As long as they retreated temporarily, when the big shot from the upper world arrived, the Holy Emperor and the holy guards could be easily destroyed. There's no hurry. Let's wait and see. Shue's son shook his head. Blood veins circled around his body. He was obviously on guard. Before they left today, the sect master had given the order that they must seize the Su family's resources and capture the Su family's young master, Su Yin. When the big shot arrived, they could use him as a sacrifice and obtain an opportunity to ascend to the upper world. However, who would have thought that the Holy Emperor, who had been missing for thousands of years, would be hiding in the Su family and disrupt Shuesan and the others' plans? Buzz. However, just as the aura in the door was getting more and more powerful, the golden light in the sky suddenly rippled. Then the golden door shattered. All the aura and it was crushed by the space in one breath, and there was no more sound. The silence lasted for a long time. Yinsun opened his mouth slightly and even trembled. He stared blankly at the dissipating golden light and suddenly did not know what to do. Originally, he thought that once the Saint Emperor gave the order, his loyal servants would definitely rush here without any regard for their own safety to welcome their emperor's return. But why did it shatter? Therefore, with his current strength, it was not impossible for him to kill those saints. However, once he forcefully opened the seal in his body, all his previous efforts would be in vain. That's right. He suddenly came to the Su family to borrow the Su family's resources and integrate the immortal item in his body as soon as possible. Once he completed this, not only would his strength be restored to its peak, but he could also use this opportunity to explore more secrets of the immortal path. However, from the looks of it now, he seemed to have acted a little too impatiently. Chapter 1430. It seems like things aren't going well for you today, Sacred Emperor. Shue's son and the others sneered as killing intent rose around them. Since the sacred guards didn't appear, they didn't have to worry anymore. As long as they destroyed the Su family today and got on the good side of the upper domain, they would have nothing to fear in the lower domain. So what if I'm alone? Yinsun stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were deep and calm. All these years, he had been trapped in the crack in the void and had experienced countless deaths. If it wasn't for the revival of the spiritual chi in the world of souls, he would have died in the spatial turbulence sooner or later. On the other hand, his cultivation had declined in this process, and he'd lost all of his former dignified bearing. But even so, Yinsun didn't regret it, because the immortal item he had obtained was enough for him to reach the peak again. Yinsun didn't summon the sacred guards in a hurry, because he was worried that there would be a traitor among the sacred guards after so many years. Since he had lost his cultivation, it would be difficult for him to deal with those who were hiding in the dark. If it wasn't for Su Yin, he wouldn't be in a hurry to expose his identity. A peerless woman who had merged with the heaven and earth spirit fire was worth the risk. The calamity had arrived, and the heavenly Tao had fallen. Although Yin Sun was talented, he still needed some helpers if he wanted to break through the heavens and ascend to a wider world. In his eyes, Su Yin alone was equivalent to 100,000 sacred guards. Her Tao shouldn't be trapped in this barren world. If that's the case, Shue's son and the others looked at each other. The hesitation in their eyes disappeared, and they revealed a bloodthirsty, killing intent. Then we can only send the sacred emperor to his death. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Shue's son took the lead and charged over furiously. Thousands of blood patterns appeared around him, and he no longer concealed his third-stage sacred realm aura. The sky collapsed, and the great Tao was destroyed. He stretched out a bloody palm and slammed it on Yin Sun's head. But at this moment, the young man, who didn't emit any aura, suddenly looked up at the sky. Then, divine light bloomed from his body. At first, it was just a wisp, but in an instant, it turned into a towering divine pillar. Boom! Shuesen's attack was shattered by the impact of the divine pillar. Even his body was forced back 1,000 feet before he miserably came to a stop. Heaven and earth were silent. Everyone looked at the young man who stood on the spot with bright eyes, and a grave expression appeared on their faces. Even the eyes of Su Qingshan, Su Kai, and the others flickered with astonishment. At this moment, they could sense that Yin Sun's aura was only at the second rank of the Saint Realm. However, the holy decree on his body was surging. It was not something that Shue's son and the others could compare to. I have roamed this world for thousands of years and fought against tens of thousands of enemies. I have never been defeated. Yin Sun slowly opened his mouth, his tone extremely calm. He did not know why the holy guards did not descend. But since he had chosen to stand in front of Su Yin, he wouldn't let her get hurt. At worst, he would find a place to cultivate in seclusion after this battle. By the time he came out of seclusion, the sacred emperor would still reign supreme in the entire lower realm. Today, for the sake of the Su family and Miss Su Yin, I will destroy your 4 sections. Boom! As Yin Sun's voice fell, his skin began to emit a golden radiance. His entire body seemed to be made of divine gold, and it revealed an endless amount of divinity. He took a step forward, and his body shone brightly like a sun. He faced the countless evil figures in the void alone. At this moment, all the Su family disciples had a look of awe on their faces. Domineering and powerful. This was what an overlord of the world should be like. Suddenly, everyone seemed to feel that. Su Yin was indeed a little too pretentious. This kind of sacred emperor was worthy of all the beauties in the world. Dark Crow Sect Master, capture the Su family's young master. Shuesen's eyes were sinister as he transmitted his voice through his divine sense. It seemed that although the Jojo's sacred emperor had lived up to his reputation in the past, it was still more than enough to deal with them. And today's matter was caused by the Su family's young master, Su Yin. As long as they captured her, the sacred emperor would have to hold back. Buzz! The Dark Crow Sect Master nodded slightly. His body suddenly turned into layers of evil fog and shrouded the Su family. Oh no! Protect Yenna! Su Qingshan's old eyes trembled as he easily guessed the Dark Crow Sect Master's intention. But before he could do anything, the Rakshasa Sect Master and the others stepped forward and blocked the Su family's path. Boom! Thousands of miles of ghostly fog covered heaven and earth. With the Dark Crow Sect Master's strength, all the Su family disciples who were shrouded by the ghostly fog felt dizzy and weak. Seeing this, Su Yin frowned slightly, and flames suddenly jumped in her beautiful eyes. An extremely terrifying, scorching heat quietly spread throughout the entire heaven and earth. Even the Dark Crow Sect Master, who was descending towards her, had a look of surprise on his face. At this moment, he seemed to see a figure shrouded in flames at the end of the evil fog, slowly walking over. There was no trace of fear in that pair of eyes that seemed to be filled with magma. Hmm. The Dark Crow sect master narrowed his eyes and pushed out with both hands. Countless amounts of underworld aura rushed down like the underworld river and instantly covered the flaming figure. With Su Yan's strength, she naturally didn't feel the slightest pressure against any venerable realm cultivator from the upper and lower worlds. However, the Dark Crow sect master was a fourth-grade sage realm cultivator. Even if the saint inscription was weak, it was still not something a venerable realm cultivator could contend against. Therefore, the moment the underworld river fell, Su Yan's eyes were filled with determination. She stretched out her hand, and a golden talisman appeared immediately. There seemed to be an extremely terrifying aura that was gradually awakening within it. But before Su Yan could use the power of the talisman, the void in front of her suddenly rippled. The expression on her face almost instantly froze. Boom! In the end, thousands of miles of underworld aura crashed down and smashed the entire square where Su Yan was. Shui Sun and the others were stunned and shouted angrily, "Dark Crow, I asked you to capture Su Yan, not to kill her." It's not your place to tell me what to do. The Dark Crow sect master snorted coldly, but his eyes were a little heavy. Just now, he seemed to have sensed an extremely weak fluctuation penetrating the Dark Crow underworld that he had set up. However, before he could sense it carefully, the fluctuation had disappeared without a trace. Therefore, he mercilessly killed just now to confirm whether there was an expert here. Damn it, all of you deserve to die. Yin Sun turned his head and looked at the place where the underworld aura was surging. True anger seemed to spread in his eyes. He struck out with his palm and actually sent Shui Sun's figure flying 1,000 feet away. He directly smashed into the edge of the underworld and then turned around and rushed toward the underworld river. However, just as Shui Sun gritted his teeth and was about to raise his leg to stop Yin Sun, he was slightly stunned. Then, as if he had sensed something, he turned his head and the expression on his face suddenly froze. Chapter 1431. You are. Shui Sun stood in the sky and looked at the two figures outside the underworld with a shocked expression. They were two women who looked like immortals. Their beauty was picturesque, and their auras were transcendent. Moreover, there was a wisp of sage realm fluctuation around the two of them. Although they had not truly stepped into this realm, they had clearly touched the threshold of the sage realm. Now that the spirit chi had recovered in this realm, there were indeed some monstrous people who had emerged from the tribulation and achieved supreme fame. However, looking at the age of these two girls, they should be people of the current generation. The threshold of the sage realm? Hiss! Suddenly, Shui Sun seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes suddenly widened. That Lord had already sent down a decree that he would descend on the Blood Demon sect in a few days. In other words, the many young masters and successors of the upper realm had probably already broken through the realm barrier and were preparing to descend into this realm. Many clans in the world of dead souls had long expected this situation. After all, a lower realm that had suddenly recovered its spirit chi and Taoist rhymes must be hiding the true fortune of heaven and earth. According to what Shui Sun knew, this fortune was related to becoming an immortal. It was rumored that the world of dead souls was originally not as desolate as it was now. It was because this realm was cursed by the gods that it had become like this. However, there must be a reason for being cursed by the gods, and it involved a true great secret of heaven and earth. Now that the spirit chi had recovered in this realm, many sect ancestors had guessed that it was very likely that the curse had been broken, and the true secret of becoming an immortal was about to appear. Under such a premise, the people from the upper realm naturally could not be stopped from coming down to search for treasures. As for the top sects in the lower realm, like the Blood Demon sect, they could only rely on external forces to seize the initiative in this tribulation. This golden age was also a great tribulation for most sections. After all, the strength of the people from the upper realm was not something that they, the natives, could compare to. Buzz! Just as Shue's son was in a daze, he saw the graceful figure in green in front of him suddenly reach out a hand and gently touch the underworld. Instantly, a terrifying chill quietly spread out, attracting countless people below to spy on them. Then, everyone was stunned to see that the Dark Crow realm that could even suppress a sage weapon was suddenly covered by a layer of ice and snow. With a light touch from the woman in green, the entire great world shattered with a bang. What kind of power is this? Gulp. Fear, panic, and even shock flickered in Yen Sun's eyes. He used to be the real emperor of the world of souls, but the coldness that penetrated deep into his bones made him feel humble and helpless. Where did these two people come from? However, right when everyone was shocked and dumbstruck, a warm and concerned voice suddenly sounded out from where the nether energy fluctuated. "Miss, are you all right?" Everyone was stunned when they heard the voice. Evidently, they had not sensed that someone had arrived. Even Su Qingshan's eyes were filled with disbelief. I'm fine. Thank you, young master." Su Yen raised his head and looked at the young man who was hugging him. When he saw the playful smile on his face lit up as well. What a familiar scene. When she first met Ling Xiao, she was being hunted down. At the critical moment, it was this young master of the Ling people who descended from the sky and stood in front of her. At that moment, day and night went by together with time. "My only wish was to travel with you to the end of the world. Young master, the human world is the most unworthy, and you are the only galaxy flowing in the darkness. It's good that you're fine." Ling Xiao gently nodded and turned to look at Yen Sun, who was rushing over in a hurry. The smile on his face widened. When he arrived earlier, he saw the auspicious clouds above the Su family at a glance. Then, he felt a terrifying fluctuation in the void. With Ling Xiao's understanding of the space and time Dao laws, he easily found the space tunnel. Moreover, he guessed the Son of Destiny's plan. The sacred emperor was trapped for 1,000 years and returned overnight. He sealed his bloodline and married into the Kai family. However, his identity was accidentally exposed by a token. What? The sacred emperor is still alive. Wind and clouds surged in the 9 prefectures. 100,000 sacred guards descended from the sky to pay their respects to the sacred emperor. Spurt. In response, Ling Xiao waved his hand and used the space-time Dao law to cut off the space tunnel. Oh, of course, Ling Xiao waited for the countless auras to enter the middle of the tunnel before he waved his hand to cut off the space tunnel. If there was a Son of Destiny among the 100,000 sacred guards, they might be trapped in some spatial turbulence. After 10,000 years, they would be able to stage the return of the king. If not, they would most likely shatter together with the tunnel. "Who are you?" Yen Sun's expression was inexplicably gloomy. At this moment, he could see that Su Yan's eyes, which are usually calm and indifferent, had some obvious ripples. Obviously, this Su family's holy daughter's heart was filled with some different emotions. This kind of emotion made Yen Sun somewhat depressed. To think that he, the sacred emperor of the 9 prefectures, wholeheartedly wanted to become Dao companions with this girl. However, she had rejected him in every possible way. From Su Yan's behavior just now, he could tell that she would rather the Su family be destroyed than give him a chance. However, as soon as this young man appeared, her attitude changed. What did this mean? Yen Sun sized up Ling Xiao from head to toe. He had to admit that this young man's appearance was indeed somewhat awesome. But in this immortal path, relying on appearance alone would not last long. When Yen Sun was roaming the world, he had seen countless young men with unparalleled looks. But in the end, the one who stood at the peak of the world was him. But, facing his doubts, Ling Xiao ignored him. Instead, he raised his head and looked at the void above. "How dare you be so unorthodox and evil?" After saying that, he suddenly raised his hand. Streaks of divine radiance began to bloom in the void above his head. In a short period of time, numerous divine swords broke through the void and stood above the young man's head. The void trembled, and the great Tao's holy intent rose and fell one after another. Everyone's expression instantly turned sluggish. At this moment, they could feel that the fluctuations on the divine swords had reached the level of sage artifacts. Some of the sword auras were even several times more terrifying than the inherited sage artifacts of the Su family. Gulp. 100 sage artifacts? That's ridiculous. The moment the young man attacked, he actually brought out 100 sacred artifacts. One had to know that in the history of the world of dead souls, there had never been so many sage artifacts. When the Su family was banished to the lower realm, although they brought some of their treasures with them, they were at most some spirit stones and emperor artifacts. Only this sage artifact, the golden cauldron, was Su Qingshan's natal artifact, which he secretly took out. But this young man actually took out 100 of the Su family's treasures with a casual wave of his hand. Is he human? Is he a god? Someone from the upper realm? In an instant, everyone seemed to have thought of something, and their eyes were filled with shock. Buzz! Just as everyone was in shock, Ling Xiao suddenly swung his hand down. Instantly, the 100 swords exploded with a shocking radiance. With the momentum to slash the sky, they went against the heavens and shook the firmament. Chapter 1432. Oh no! The expressions of the demon sect powerhouses changed drastically, especially the terrifying sharpness contained in the torrent of sword intent. It was as if it could tear the world apart. In just one breath, dozens of demon sect disciples were pierced through by the sword intent and fell from the sky. Spiritual light and Taoist rhymes surged around Shui Sun and the others. They formed seals out of thin air in an attempt to stop the sword intent. However, how could these false saints from the lower realm be Ling Xiao's opponent? Therefore, the moment the bloody dark qi collided with the torrent of sword intent, the void shattered, and a wisp of blood quietly drifted out. Among the 5 saints, 3 were immediately swallowed by the sword intent. The remaining Shui Sun and the Dark Crow sect master were covered in blood and fell from the sky. The entire world was dead silent. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock and fear as they looked at the blood and corpses falling from the sky. Was this the upper realm's prodigy? With a wave of his hand, he could destroy tens of thousands of enemies. Even Shui Sun, a saint powerhouse who had been famous for a long time, was as weak as an ant in front of him. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at the Dark Crow sect master and the Berserker sect master playfully. In the next moment, 2 tall and burly figures suddenly appeared behind the 2 of them and smashed down with their fists. The master of the Dark Crow sect and Shui Sun were astonished. At this moment, both of them were on guard against the young man in front of them. They did not expect a powerhouse to suddenly appear behind them. Therefore, Xiong Huan and the Berserker sect master's fists almost instantly penetrated their defenses and completely smashed their flesh and bones. Gulp! Seeing this, the shock on the Su family's faces intensified. He had smashed 2 4th-grade Sage Realm experts into pieces with a single punch. What kind of divine might was this? As expected, no one from the upper realm could be underestimated. In particular, Xiong Huan and the Berserker sect master both had a tyrannical aura. In front of them, even Su Qingshan felt a sense of inferiority. Speak, who sent you? Ling Xiao walked up to Shui Sun and saw that the great elder of the Blood Demon sect had long lost his vitality and his face was pale. You can't kill us. There's someone above us. Oh, up there? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and the smile on his face grew wider. Not bad. Our Blood Demon sect is a vassal force of the Blood Demon Great Abyss, an immortal sect in the upper realm. My Great Abyss saint will soon arrive here. If you kill us, not only will you die, but the Su family will also be destroyed. Shui Sun smiled sinisterly, but when he saw that Ling Xiao's face did not have the slightest ripple, his heart suddenly trembled. The Blood Demon Great Abyss was not considered an immortal inheritance in the Azure Sky realm. At most, it could be considered a first-rate power. Furthermore, it was a demonic sect that was constantly suppressed. Of course, perhaps in the eyes of the people from the lower realm, all the forces from the upper realm were immortal. As for the blood demon Holy Sun, Ling Xiao had never even heard of him. He was most likely trash. So, the blood demon Holy Sun sent you here? Ling Xiao nodded lightly and raised his foot to crush Shui Sen's head. Young master. However, at this moment, Su Qingshan suddenly exclaimed and blocked his way. Young master, our Su family is indebted to you, but let's let this matter go. At this moment, the Su family's patriarch thought that since Shui Sun and the others had already been defeated, there was no need to kill them. Sparing their lives might cause the Blood Demon sect to hesitate and not attack the Su family. More importantly, Ling Xiao's identity was most likely a young master from the upper realm who came here to train. However, since he was here to train, he definitely could not stay here for a long time. After he left, if the Blood Demon Holy Sun found trouble with the Su family again, the Su family would not be able to escape death. Let this matter go. Ling Xiao smiled gently and suddenly stomped his foot, crushing Shui Sen's head into pieces. Brat, you'll regret it sooner or later. The Dark Crow sect's patriarch roared angrily, and the yin qi in his body surged. An oppressive and vast aura immediately erupted, and he actually chose to destroy his own physical body. However, before his soul could escape, frost suddenly spread above the void and sealed the heaven and earth. The Dark Crow sect's patriarch, who was already seriously injured, was directly frozen by the chill and fell to the ground, shattering into ice shards. Su Qingshan's lips trembled slightly, and he only felt a chill rising from the bottom of his heart. He had the urge to cry. You've acted tough and killed people. If you just leave, the Su family will be no more. Damn it. Today, no matter what, he had to think of a way to rely on this big tree. Haha, young master, you're decisive and tenacious. This old man really admires you. Su Qingshan took a deep breath and suddenly waved his hand at Su Yin. Young master, you saved Yin'er just now. Our Su family is really unable to repay you. Why don't you let Yin'er stay by your side as a maid? What? Hearing this, Yin Sun's face almost instantly turned ashen. During the battle, just now, this old thing said that he wanted to betroth Su Yin to him. The battle just ended, and he gave Su Yin to someone else as a maid? Maid, this is simply an insult to Miss Su Yin. Su Qingshan, are you planning to violate the marriage agreement and become an untrustworthy person? Yin Sun shouted coldly, and his eyes were cold. He would not allow this. He would not allow Su Yin to be humiliated like this. A talented girl who had merged with the heaven and earth spirit fire to be someone else's maid? If Yin Sun still had half of his strength, he would have killed Su Qingshan on the spot. Even so, he was not afraid at all. Even if Ling Xiao's combat strength was terrifying, he was still fearless. When had the Emperor of the 9 provinces ever been afraid? At most, he would take Su Yin away and return to the place where he used to cultivate in seclusion to avoid the catastrophe. When the world of dead souls returned to peace, all the people from the upper realm would leave. Then, who would be his opponent in this world? Of course, the reason why he liked Su Yin was not only because of her talent and her beauty. There was also a more important reason. When he was in control of the 9 provinces, he had accidentally found a heaven and earth spirit fire. However, with his strength, he could not even seal it, let alone merge with the heaven and earth spirit fire. Yin Sun had no choice but to set up a method to conceal the place where the heaven and earth spirit fire was hidden. If he could marry Su Yin, he might be able to learn the heaven and earth spirit fire fusion technique. At that time, he would be invincible. Emperor Yin, it is true that I made this marriage contract with the ancestors of the Yin family. However, the precondition is that the descendants of both parties are in love with each other. Now, you have seen it for yourself. Yin is unwilling to marry you. I have no choice. Su Qingshan smiled awkwardly. How about this, Su Yu? I will marry Su Yu to you. In love with each other? Since the marriage contract is about love, have you asked for Miss Yin Er's opinion when you forcefully sent her to be a maid? Yin Sun snorted coldly and suddenly turned to look at Su Yin. "Miss Yin, don't worry. If you are unwilling today, I, Yin Sun, swear on my Tao heart that no one can force you." "No one can." Yin Sun glanced at Ling Xiao indifferently, without a trace of fear. He had fought with countless enemies in his life. What he hated the most was this kind of noble and arrogant young master. Chapter 1433. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. First stage, Sage Realm, mighty Sage Emperor Body, and 12,000 Providence points. It was obvious that this god of war, who had accidentally exposed his identity, still had some tricks up his sleeves. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to be so domineering after seeing Lu Xian's combat strength. However, the more trump cards he had, the more benefits Ling Xiao would reap. Even if a force from the lower world like the Blood Demon sect obtained many numinous treasures, it was just a small fortune in Ling Xiao's eyes. The fortune in the hands of these children of destiny was the real fortune. Moreover, this sacred emperor didn't come back earlier or later. He broke free from the shackles just as Spirit Qi was recovering. What did this mean? It meant that his appearance might have something to do with the secret of the world of souls. At least, in Ling Xiao's eyes, these children of destiny from the lower world were the key to opening the treasury of this realm. Yin Sun's eyes were cold, and his expression was cold. After all, he was once the emperor of this world. He stood high above the 9 heavens and looked down on the common people. His pride was bought with the blood of his enemies. Although the people from the upper world were terrifying, their numinous treasures and cultivation techniques were far superior to those from the lower world. However, with the shackles of the heavenly Tao, even if these people were powerful and had a deep foundation, they could only come to the lower world as saints. Yin Sun didn't think that he was inferior to anyone at his peak. In other words, he didn't have to worry about anyone in this world. Even if the sacred guards didn't appear, he could reach the top of the world again and become a saint again, young master's maid and 9 states' divine empress. Was it difficult to choose between these two identities? As long as a woman had some brains and ambition, she would know what to do. Moreover, although this young master was handsome, the women beside him were all peerless. Su Yin wouldn't be favored if she followed him. What was the point? Sacred Emperor Yin, you worry too much. It is Su Yan's honor to be your maid. However, just as Yin Sun snorted in his heart and argued with Ling Xiao, the girl beside him suddenly spoke softly. Yin, don't worry. I will definitely in. Yin Sun smiled warmly, but before he could finish his words, he suddenly froze on the spot. He turned around and stared at Su Yin in a daze. His lips quivered, and he couldn't calm himself down. Luck of 3 lifetimes. Miss Su Yin, you can speak the truth. I said that I will protect you, and no one in this world can hurt you. Yin Sun pondered for a moment before coming to a conclusion. Or rather, this was the only possible conclusion. Su Qingshan must have secretly threatened Miss Su Yin. What I said is the truth. To be able to become young master's maid is Yin Er's greatest honor. Su Yin chuckled. Not a trace of grievance or embarrassment could be seen on his face. When this scene landed in the eyes of the Su family's people, they were also extremely surprised. Who would have thought that Su Yin, who had always been cold and aloof, would show such a fawning attitude towards a man? Even though this black-clothed young master was indeed peerlessly handsome, possessed extremely terrifying combat strength, and even came from the upper realm. Oh, isn't that enough? Her status, background, appearance, and talent were all top-notch. She was impeccable and had no choice but to love her. Yin Sun's eyes widened, and there was confusion between his eyebrows. In his impression, Su Yin shouldn't be such a superficial and materialistic woman. But how did the cold and arrogant goddess in his eyes become someone else's maid in the blink of an eye? Good. I don't want to stay in this Su family anymore. Su family. Su Yin, I will remember you. This humiliation, I will make you pay back 100 times sooner or later. Yin Sun took a deep breath, and his eyes suddenly became deep and profound. A dragon in the shallows would be teased by a shrimp. He didn't expect that after being trapped for 1,000 years, he would be humiliated like this when he returned to the 9 continents. Forget it. When he recovered his cultivation and completely unraveled the secret hidden in the immortal item, the Sioux family would definitely regret today's matter. Can I understand that you're threatening my maidservant? Just as Yin Sun was filled with resentment and was about to turn around and leave, Ling Xiao suddenly smiled and spoke in a calm tone. Huh? Hearing that, not only was Yin Sun stunned, but everyone in the Sioux family was also stunned. He protected her just like that? Especially Su Yu. Her beautiful face revealed a strong sense of indignation. Why? Why did this Su Yin, who appeared out of nowhere, steal all the glory that originally belonged to her? If not for her, the position of the young master of the Su family should have been hers. When the sacred emperor fought for the limelight, the protection of the young master from the upper world should also be hers. What did you say? Yin Sun turned around and looked at Ling Xiao. His eyes were already filled with an uncontrollable desire to battle. Although I don't like to fight with others, but if someone humiliates the people around me, I naturally won't sit by and do nothing. Ling Xiao's expression was calm, and there was a faint sword aura around him. In the sky, the sound of swords rang, and the wind and clouds changed drastically. Good. When this emperor ruled the world, no one knew where you were. I didn't expect that today. Even a junior would dare to provoke this emperor. Yin Sun was so angry that he laughed. No matter how stable his mind was, he was already on the verge of exploding. This feeling of being humiliated and looked down on was really something that he hadn't felt in a long time. So, do you want to fight with this emperor? Boom! Just as Yin Sun finished speaking, Ling Xiao suddenly took a step forward. Behind him, hundreds of ancient swords shone at the same time. Without any nonsense, they slashed towards him. Buzz! In an instant, the void was torn apart, and the torrent of sword aura crushed the heavens. 1,000 feet long sword shadow stretched across the world and slashed down furiously. It actually cut off time and space, causing it to cease to exist for eternity. The scene was simply too shocking. As a result, Su Qingshan swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. In front of such a peerless monster, he didn't have the courage to open his mouth. After all, if he angered this young master, the Su family might very well be destroyed today. What can I do? I've already offended the sage emperor and the devil. I can only use all my strength to suck up to this young master from the upper world. Only then will the Su family have a chance of survival. Yin Sun's expression changed, and the last bit of hesitation in his heart disappeared. Or rather, he didn't dare to hesitate at all. Under this shocking sword, there was no way he could escape. Buzz! At this moment, Yin Sun's body suddenly surged with boundless golden light. In just a short moment, it turned into a holy shadow that was hundreds of feet long, towering in the sky and enveloping his body. The dazzling golden light spread, and the sage's will of the great Tao surged like a river. The void collapsed, and the universe was reversed. Then, the holy shadow suddenly raised his hand and pushed towards the thousands of swords. Chapter 1434. Boom! The 100-foot sword intent swept across the sky and came crashing down. The sacred shadow's outstretched palm was directly shattered by the sword will. Yin Sun's expression changed drastically as the golden light around his body surged. Unfortunately, it was meaningless. Under Ling Xiao's sword aura, his overlord body's divine light did not have the slightest bit of resistance. Finally, countless cracks began to appear on the 100-feet-tall holy shadow. Poochie! In the end, Yin Sun spat out a mouthful of blood as a ray of dark light shone from his hand. The holy figure, along with the entire sky, shattered in an instant. However, just as the sword aura was about to annihilate him, a golden door suddenly appeared behind him. This time, Yin Sun didn't hesitate in the slightest. He directly stepped into it and vanished without a trace. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes, but there was no change in his expression. When he came to the lower realm, he had already ordered Ning Chuan to seal the entrance. With Ning Chuan's attainments in array formations, no one below the Supreme Being level could break it. In other words, one could only enter the world of dead souls and not leave. No matter what tricks Emperor Yin had up his sleeve, he would not be able to escape from Ling Xiao's grasp. Clang! As the golden door disappeared, an ancient token fell to the ground. Ling Xiao raised his hand and kept the ancient token. The corners of his mouth gradually curled up into a smile. It was obvious that the divine royal token was a symbol of Yin Sun's identity and also something he relied on to communicate with the experts in the divine royal palace. A spatial spiritual treasure was considered a supreme creation in the lower realm. However, in the midst of the chaos, Yin Sun had no choice but to throw out the token in exchange for his life. Young master, Yi Qingchan and Xianyuan Weiyang descended from the sky and looked at the direction Yin Sun had escaped with worry in their eyes. Should we? No need. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled with a calm expression. From the looks of it now, Yin Sun should be hiding some other secrets. That was why he had the confidence to challenge him. After all, sooner or later, the good fortune of the lower realm would reappear in the world under the efforts of the Children of Destiny. At that time, Ling Xiao would only need to use the heaven-shrouding talisman to harvest all of them. A person of destiny with slightly more than 10,000 providence was not worth wasting a providence plundering talisman on. Not to mention, Ling Xiao had already left a mark on Yin Sun's body when they exchanged blows earlier. As for hatred and whatnot, according to Ling Xiao's settings, since he wanted to fight for the good fortune, he was already in a situation where he would fight to the death with the Children of Destiny. 100,000 holy guards had been buried, and the remaining holy emperor was nothing more than a treasure-seeking mouse. Ha, young master is so mighty. Seeing the Saint Emperor leave in such a sorry state, Su Qingshan and the others immediately smiled and gathered around Ling Xiao. The strength of this young master in front of them could be said to have completely subverted their understanding of the current generation of monsters. Even though Su Qingshan and the others had seen the true geniuses of the upper realm, compared to this young man, they were still too insignificant. He had killed 5 saints and forced the Sage Emperor to retreat. These feats were enough for the Su family to let down their guard and focus on licking him. Young master, our Su family will have to rely on you in the future. I still don't know your name, but looking at your divine appearance, you must be the successor of the young master of the immortal inheritance. My name is Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao's face was expressionless, and his tone was extremely calm. The expressions on Su Qingshan and Su Kai's faces almost instantly became dull. Ling. That's right, they guessed that Ling Xiao's identity was definitely not ordinary. This kind of combat strength that could crush a saint was not something that could be nurtured by an ordinary sect. However, they still did not expect that this young master was actually from the Ling people. Even though Su Qingshan and the others had been in the lower realm for a long time, they were still deeply afraid of the Taigu Ling people. In fact, in the entire Azure continent, only the Realm Lord Palace could stand shoulder to shoulder with this clan. Even the Sky Saint Business Alliance could only be submissive in front of this force and did not dare to be rash at all. So it's the Ling people. Young master, you're here. The Su clan did not welcome you. Please forgive us. Su Kai exclaimed and almost knelt on the ground. Although he did not know what Ling Xiao's identity was among the Ling people, but even if the Ling people were a dog in the lower realm, it was enough for them to treat it as a distinguished guest. It's fine. I was originally invited by young Master Hua to come here to find the descendant of the Su clan. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently and did not have a trace of arrogance, which surprised Su Kai and the others. Gentle, humble, and decisive, this Lord Ling Xiao could achieve great things. Young Master Hua. No one in the world of dead souls knew about the origin of the Su clan. Back then, the reason why they fled here was to avoid Su Buqian's pursuit. However, How did the Hua clan's young master know about their whereabouts? Of course, with the Hua clan's methods, it was not that they could not find out the whereabouts of Su Kai's lineage. And Ling Xiao only needed to arrange a few chess pieces, and it was enough for Hua Mingxi to sniff out many clues. Now, the Hua clan's young master was indeed not as useful as before. However, don't forget, she still had another identity. She was Zhang Jiuji's second senior sister, and Ling Xiao still needed to find out the whereabouts of the other senior sisters from her. Then, he would follow the vine to find the melon, the greenwood sovereign, and the whereabouts of the realm lord. Every step had to be done carefully and not reveal the slightest flaw. And the Su clan in the lower realm was the reason why Ling Xiao lured Hua Mingxi here. As long as the Hua clan's young master descended to the lower realm, there was a high chance that she would not be able to return. After all, I, Ling Xiao, am a man of my word. I said that I would help her find Lei Yun, so I will definitely reunite the two sisters. Young master, let's talk inside. Su Kai, send someone to clean up these corpses. Su Qingshan's face turned solemn. He immediately led Ling Xiao to the main hall. In the end, although Su Qingshan and the others were hiding here, they were always looking forward to returning to the Qing San continent and the Su clan. Back then, Su Buqian and Su Kai were fighting for the position of the clan head. In the end, Su Kai was defeated and his entire clan was almost slaughtered. That was why they were reduced to this state. However, the Su clan's old ancestors did not care about this. In the end, the principle of the winner being the king was applicable no matter if it was a sect or an ancient clan. Su Buqian won, so he became the clan head of the Su clan. Su Kai lost, so he should bear the crime and struggle at death's door in this desolate lower realm. However, now, the Hua clan's young master and this Ling people came to the lower realm together to search for their traces. Why? Young master, this time you came to the lower realm. Su Qingshan let Ling Xiao sit on the main seat in the main hall while he sat on the lower seat. We will discuss these matters when young Master Hua comes. Elder Su, do you know the reason behind the revival of the spiritual qi in this lower realm? At this moment, Ling Xiao was not in a hurry to reveal Su Luan's identity. At the very least, before Hua Mingxi's arrival, he would not show too much enthusiasm to the Su clan to avoid arousing suspicion. Su Luan's purpose was to wait until Su Yin returned to the Su clan. With Ling Xiao's protection, even if this trip did not go well, Su Buqian and his people would not dare to be too presumptuous. And Hua Mingxi was an excuse, an opportunity for Su Yin to return to the Su clan. In this way, in the whole matter, Ling Xiao was just an outsider who was happy to help others. Chapter 1435. The reason? This young master will return to the upper realm after obtaining the good fortune, right? Su Qingshan sighed softly, and his eyes were a little uneasy. Senior, don't worry. I came here because of young Master Hua's invitation. However, I will definitely protect the Su family. At the very least, those disasters must be eliminated before I go to the upper realm. Sensing the anxiety of the Su family's old ancestor, Ling Xiao immediately smiled warmly. Thank you, young master. Thank you, young master. Hearing this, Su Qingshan finally heaved a sigh of relief. The current Su family not only provoked the Blood Demon sect and the Blood Demon abyss behind it, but also offended the Emperor of the Nine States from thousands of years ago. It could be said that they were in a dilemma. If not for Ling Xiao, the Su family's final outcome would only be destruction. However, with Ling Xiao's promise, whether it was the Blood Demon abyss or the Emperor, they would have some concerns. Ling people, to these people from the lower realm, might not be too intimidating. Only those sects and forces with the upper realm background knew what these two words meant. Tell me, what major events have happened in the world of souls in the past year? Young master, in the past year, the Nine States could be said to be in turmoil. Many geniuses have appeared, and even the three great sinner clans have appeared. Su Qingshan smiled bitterly. Compared to the three great sinner clans, the Su family's status was too insignificant. Therefore, when this great calamity descended, the Su family did not have too much ambition. However, Su Yan's appearance was really an unexpected surprise. And if she could really obtain the young master's favor, it might be an opportunity for the Su family to return to the upper realm. As for Su Yan's origin, there was not a trace of doubt at all. With Ling Yuanxing's means, it was easy for him to plant a few pawns in the world of souls. Oh, Senior, do you know where the source of the revival of the spirit qi is? Ling Xiao picked up the tea served by the maidservant and took a sip. However, Su Qingshan shook his head hesitantly. Young master, I don't know the exact source, but there's a saying in the world of souls. The reason why this world is so desolate is because a sinner immortal is buried in this world. Sinful immortal? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and smiled. Interesting. Young master said, the Hua clan's young master is also coming. That's right. Currently, the Heaven Saint Merchant Union is in a state of chaos. The Hua clan is already powerless to contend against the Liu clan. As for the Su clan, it has been experiencing great changes in recent years. Perhaps it's time for you to return to the Su clan. Ling Xiao nodded, his tone rather calm. But when these words fell into the ears of Su Qingshan and Su Kai, they were like thunder in their ears, unable to calm down for a long time. Return to the Su family? Of course, this is just my opinion. As an outsider, it is naturally inconvenient for me to interfere in the matters of the Sky Sacred Business Alliance. However, I have a very deep friendship with young Master Hua. I will do my best to satisfy her. This, Su Kai and Su Qingshan looked at each other, then suddenly stood up and bowed towards Ling Xiao. Thank you, young master. With just a Hua family young master, it would be difficult for Su Kai's line to return to the Su family. However, if Su Kai had the support of Ling people, then it would be a different story. Where is the Blood Demon sect? Ling Xiao did not say much, but his eyes suddenly flashed with coldness. Blood Demon Abyss. He had heard of this demon sect before. However, this Blood Demon Holy Son did not have any reputation at all. However, in order to show his respect to this demon sect, Ling Xiao still planned to personally make a trip to the Blood Demon sect and confiscate all the loot they had plundered. Blood Demon sect? Young master, it is on the Blood Demon Mountain in the south of the Cloud region. I understand. Prepare a courtyard for me. Do not allow anyone to disturb me. Ling Xiao nodded lightly. Now that the various forces had just descended to the lower realm, he planned to give the Blood Demon Holy Son some time to prepare. As for Ling Xiao's identity, no one knew except for the Su family. If this group of demons personally came to take revenge, it would save him a lot of time. Yes. Su Kai hurriedly stood up and walked out of the hall. Soon, a servant girl came over and led Ling Xiao, Yi Qingshan, and the other two girls out of the main hall and to a secluded place in the city. Young master, if you have any instructions, just tell Yin. Su Kai gave Su Yin a look, and the latter immediately bowed and walked to Ling Xiao's side. Thank you. Ling Xiao pushed open the courtyard door and walked in with the three women. Immediately, he set up the ancient universe formation and sealed all divine soul perception. Young master, when there was no one else in the courtyard, Su Yan's face bloomed with a sincere smile. Thank you for your hard work. Ling Xiao reached out and pulled Su Yan into his arms and sat in front of a stone chair in the courtyard. Yin, you should already be clear about the Su family's matters. When Huang Mingxi arrives, act according to the plan. Young master, don't worry. Su Yan smiled gently and chatted with Ling Xiao about many interesting things in the lower realm. Yi Qingshan took out a tea set and stove from her universe ring. She sat cross-legged and burned incense to make tea. Late at night, Xin Yuan Weiyang looked at the three people talking and laughing in front of her, and her beautiful face was slightly tired. Young master, Sister Qingshan, Sister Su Yin, I'm gonna rest first. In terms of age, Xin Yuan Weiyang was actually much older than Yi Qingshan and Su Yin. But her temperament was too weak. Except for Bai Jishi, she called everyone sister. When she walked into the room, Yi Qingshan's lips curled into a smile. Young master, it's late. Why don't we rest early? "Ah, Sister Qingchan, then let's go together." Ling Xiao smiled and carried Su Yin in his arms. He held Yi Qingchan's jade-like hand, and with a thought, his figure instantly disappeared on the spot. Realm, Spirit Spring. In the spring, the moonlight was mottled and there were many figures. In the jagged waves, the moonlight was shattered and the water vapor rose, creating endless ripples. This reunion of ice and fire was destined to be a never-ending battle song. Issa. The next day, when the sun rose, Xinyuan Weiyang opened the door and saw Yi Qingchan and Su Yin sitting in front of the stone table. Their faces were beautiful and their bodies were radiant. "Sister Qingchan, did you and Sister Su Yin not rest at all last night?" Xinyuan Weiyang rubbed her sleepy eyes, and there was a lazy and surprised look on her face. Hearing this, Yi Qingchan and Su Yin looked at each other and smiled but didn't say anything. At the same time, on the 8th floor of the Glaze ancient pagoda, Ling Xiao put his hands behind his back and looked at the darkness in front of him. There was a faint surprise in his eyes. Now that he had entered the Sage Realm, the seal on the 8th floor could no longer stop him. After Feng Ling left, Ling Xiao also didn't come to the pagoda for a long time. However, before Feng Ling left that day, she said that she wanted to find something. According to Ling Xiao's guess, the thing she wanted to find was probably not in the Azure world, but the real immortal domain. Then, how did she break through the barrier of the mortal realm and ascend to the immortal domain? After the great war of the immortals and demons, the immortals not only sealed a few major demon clans, but also destroyed all the passages from the mortal realm to the immortal domain. In that case, where did the sealed spirit go? Buzz. Just as Ling Xiao was pondering, a figure suddenly walked over from the darkness in the distance. Chapter 1436. Buzz. A gust of wind suddenly blew in the originally calm space of the ancient pagoda. A figure shrouded in darkness slowly walked toward Ling Xiao. However, Ling Xiao was surprised that the demonic figure's aura was only at the first level of the Saint Realm. It was not even comparable to the reckless demon realm. Something was wrong. Ling Xiao frowned slightly. According to the order of appearance of the demonic creatures in the ancient pagoda, the higher the level, the stronger the cultivation of the demons. If Ling Xiao was right, the demon on the 8th level should be the last demon in the pagoda. In other words, the 9th level was the place where the Foliaceae sealed the demonic bones. The great demon on the 8th level was definitely more terrifying than the reckless demon realm. However, the first level of the Saint Realm? It was only when the figure in the darkness walked in front of Ling Xiao that the latter's face revealed a hint of surprise. At this moment, the figure in front of him was himself. Or rather, it was a figure that was identical to him in terms of appearance, aura, and cultivation. It was Ling Xiao's first time encountering the mirror image Dao law. Interesting. Ling Xiao's lips curled into a smile. The demonic figure also had a smile on his face. It was very lifelike. If the terrifying part of the overlapping shadows was its transformation and concealment, then the demonic figure in front of him was the ultimate imitation. In this aspect, he was somewhat similar to Little Wu. It was just that he didn't know what level his battle prowess was at. Buzz. A wisp of sword essence suddenly gathered at Ling Xiao's fingertip. The demonic figure's hand was also filled with sword essence. In fact, even the power of the way contained within was the same. Could it be that he had also comprehended the sword principle? Ling Xiao's eyes turned cold. He suddenly stretched out his hand. Lightning surged on it, and the divine inscriptions moved freely. A surprising scene occurred. The demonic figure's hand was also blooming with lightning. It was filled with an extremely violent aura. Interesting. Ling Xiao grinned. Without any hesitation, he waved his hand and clashed with the demonic figure. Boom! A terrifying loud noise immediately resounded. Ling Xiao and the demonic figure both retreated dozens of steps before stabilizing their bodies. To be honest, Ling Xiao's heart was filled with astonishment at this moment. Originally, He had thought that the demon's technique was similar to an illusion. However, it was only when their fists collided that he realized the true terror of this devil. Not only could he change his appearance, but he could also perfectly deduce his strength and Tao laws. It should be known that young Master Wu's divine body could only deduce cultivation methods. However, this demon was even able to manifest Tao laws. What kind of ability was this? This was a power that defied the heavens. Fighting with him was equivalent to facing an exact copy of himself. How could he win? Of course, it would not be easy for the devil to win. However, from the very beginning, he had placed himself in an invincible position. However, at this time, Ling Xiao had some guesses. If the devil could deduce all his strength, he did not have to go through so much trouble. He could just use a supreme attack to suppress him on the spot. Therefore, there must be a limit to his ability to deduce. It was very likely related to time. Not bad. This is really getting more and more interesting. Ling Xiao grinned. Suddenly, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Then, he clenched his fist, and the demonic blade of samsara appeared in his hand. The devil also clenched his fist and formed an identical modeled ancient blade. However, in the next moment, endless demonic will suddenly surged around Ling Xiao. It circled around the ancient blade and slashed down furiously. Buzz! An ear-piercing buzzing sound suddenly resounded. The entire space of the ancient pagoda was shattered by the demonic light. A purple divine lightning descended from the sky and enveloped the demonic figure. However, this time, his expression was not as calm as before. Instead, it revealed a look of intense fear. Sky Demon Will. The demonic figure was so flustered that his eyes were filled with despair and the desire to die. In the next moment, he revealed his true form and tried to block the purple lightning saber momentum. Boom! However, this was the space of the ancient pagoda. Ling Xiao could change the situation here with just a thought. Moreover, the sky demon will have the power to restrain all demons. Therefore, the moment the saber momentum fell, the demonic figure finally let out an unwilling roar and knelt on the ground in despair. But, just as the saber momentum fell 3 feet above his head, it suddenly stopped. The trembling body of the demonic figure gradually calmed down. He slowly raised his head, revealing a gentle and handsome face. Especially those eyes. They were as deep as the sea of stars, but there was no trace of demonic nature. Instead, they were extremely gentle. Who are you? Ling Xiao said indifferently as he sheathed his saber. In this world, there were some forces that could be deduced. However, there were some forces that could not be deduced. Otherwise, the word forbidden would be too weak. I am Lian, the Mirror Demon. Greetings to Lord Sky Demon. Mirror Demon? Ling Xiao nodded gently. He had guessed the power and limitations of this demon. The power that you have copied cannot last long, right? Yes. I can only use it the moment my opponent uses his power. Lian scratched his head and looked a little embarrassed. Moreover, this kind of power cannot exceed the limits of my physical body. What is your limit? Ling Xiao smiled. He did not expect the mirror demon to be so pure and kind. That kind of clean and shy smile was really easy to let one's guard down. My realm is at the level of an earthly sovereign. Therefore, the power that I can withstand can only be below the level of a heavenly sovereign. I see. Thinking about it, if Li Yin could copy the power regardless of the realm, how could he be trapped here? However, to be able to copy the power of a peak level 9 sovereign with the cultivation of a first-grade earthly sovereign, it was an extremely incredible talent. Are you willing to submit to me? In the end, Ling Xiao did not say any more nonsense. Now that the Qingsong world was in chaos, he needed people around him. With Li Yan's means and strength, he would be a good help. Lord Sky Demon, you don't lack subordinates, right? I have no ambition. I only want to find a quiet place in the mountains to raise fish and flowers and teach a few children to read and write. Li Yin shook his head, his eyes gentle and persistent. This is not up to you. Now that the celestial tribe controls the 9 heavens, Once your identity is exposed, you will be killed. You only need to follow me. When I regain control of the world, I will return your freedom." The soul runes in Ling Xiao's eyes condensed and turned into a soul seal, standing in the void. On the other hand, Li Yin glanced at Ling Xiao in surprise before nodding. "So my lord is in trouble. That's good too. Li Yin will first help my lord before helping myself." His voice was still extremely gentle, without the slightest bit of displeasure because of the soul seal. It was as if he was a demon that could not be angry, and all he thought about was others. Buzz. Chapter 1437. As the soul seal fell, Lian's eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of confusion, but he quickly regained his clarity. "Greetings, my lord." Ling Xiao waved his hand and directly brought Li Yin out of the ancient pagoda and into the realm. Feeling the terrifying spiritual qi in this realm, Li Yan's eyes suddenly revealed a trace of surprise. What a rich spiritual qi! What a beautiful scenery! You stay here for the time being and recover your cultivation. This realm is full of my followers. You can choose a place where no one is around to cultivate. Ling Xiao smiled helplessly. A gentle demon? No wonder Li Yan was sealed in the 8th level. With his talent, he should have been a demon lord who dominated the world. But his temperament was too kind, and he stood aloof from worldly affairs. With Yi Luoyun's temperament, he could be suppressed with a little trick. "Thank you, my lord." Li Yan respectfully bowed to Ling Xiao, then lifted his foot and walked down the hall. But what surprised Ling Xiao was that he didn't choose to cultivate in seclusion immediately. Instead, he visited all the creatures in the realm one by one. Even the ancient Fusong tree and the green carp were not left out. It was really funny. In the Su family's courtyard, a layer of ripples suddenly appeared in the void. Ling Xiao's figure descended from the sky, but Xin Yuan Weiyang's pretty face suddenly turned red. Immediately, she stood up from the stone chair with an uneasy expression. She looked at Su Yin and Yi Qingchan, who were smiling playfully at a loss. Finally, she ran back to her room with a red face. "What did you say to her?" Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. He picked up a cup of tea on the table and took a sip. "It's nothing. This Lady Weiyang is truly too naive." Yi Qingchan and Su Yin looked at each other and smiled. There was inexplicable meaning in their eyes. "Is Huamingxi here?" "I don't think so. Otherwise, the Su clan would have sent someone to invite young master over." Su Yin shook his head. However, Ling Xiao's expression suddenly became somewhat gloomy. "Let's not wait anymore. Let's first deal with the calamity of the Blood Demon sect." Now that 2 days had passed, the Blood Demon sect had not come to take revenge. It was clear that the Blood Demon Holy Sun had most likely not arrived yet. However, the reason why Ling Xiao had come to the lower realm was to harvest the person with destiny. He could not stay in the Su family for long. "Yes, young master." Su Yin and the other man exchanged glances before following Ling Xiao out of the courtyard. "Oh, young master, where are you going?" "Wait for me." Xin Yuan Weiyang's voice came from the courtyard, and a smile appeared on the faces of the three. When the four of them arrived in front of the Su family's main hall, Su Kai, Su Qingshan, and the other 2 sage stage elders were already bowing and waiting. It was obvious that there were servants of the Su family outside the courtyard, constantly paying attention to the actions of Ling Xiao and the others. When they saw Ling Xiao, the faces of the Su family's experts immediately revealed a trace of humility. However, when they looked at Su Yin, there was more or less a deeper meaning in their eyes. She had not returned for an entire night. It seemed that this maid was very doted on by the young master. "Senior Su, I plan to make a trip to the Blood Demon sect." "Young master, this old man will go with you?" Su Qingshan's eyes were slightly cold. As a force of the Cloud Prefecture, he was naturally familiar with the methods of the Blood Demon sect, especially the Blood Demon sect's master, who is the true top expert of the Cloud Prefecture. The might of the Blood Demon evil technique was unparalleled. Even Su Qingshan was extremely wary of it. "No need. Yin you stay as well." When Hua Mingxi arrives, tell her to wait for me in the Su family, Ling Xiao said indifferently. The moment he stepped out, a golden dragon carriage appeared, carrying Ling Xiao and the other two towards the Blood Demon Mountain. Farewell, young master. Su Qingshan and the rest bowed and did not get up for a long time. At the same time, at the border of the Cloud Prefecture, in a bare mountain forest, Yin Sun's figure fell from the sky in a sorry state. His face was pale, and his aura was extremely weak. For the entire day, he did not even rest for a moment, as he was afraid that Ling Xiao would catch up to him. This young man's strength was simply too terrifying. According to Yin Sun's guess, even if Su Mo was at his peak, it would still take some effort to kill him. Damn Su family, damn Su Yin. Just you wait. Yin Sun took a deep breath and clenched his fist. A bronze fragment suddenly appeared in his hand. Ancient runes circled around it, and the Taoist rhyme was leisurely. It contained supreme, immortal intent. Wait until I integrate the immortal rhyme in this fragment and comprehend the divine runes on it. Then, my cultivation will definitely recover. At that time, thinking of this, Yin Sun immediately calmed down. He found an empty cave and set up a sealing enchantment. Then, he began to cultivate again. The Blood Demon Mountain was a majestic, ancient mountain located in the south of the Cloud Prefecture. The entire mountain was blood red, as if it was watered with fresh blood. It was a ghastly sight. Of course, compared to this mountain, the demon sect in this mountain was more famous. The Blood Demon sect could be said to be the most famous demon sect in the Cloud Prefecture. Usually, no one dared to provoke them. More importantly, it was said that this sect had some background in the upper world. Even the 3 sinner clans had to be courteous to them. Although the Cloud Prefecture was not the most prosperous divine prefecture in the 9 prefectures, the Blood Demon sect master was truly a powerful figure in the 9 prefectures. At this moment, in the main hall at the peak of the mountain, a skinny old man in a blood-red robe was twirling a string of white-boned spiritual pearls in his hand. His eyes were extremely sinister. So, Shue's son and the others died in the hands of a sword cultivator. Sect master, according to my investigation, there was a shocking sword chi in the sky above the Su family that day. There was also a terrifying chill that sealed the heavens and earth. Below the main hall, a middle-aged man in a blood-red robe nodded gently. There was a hint of fear in his eyes. With the strength of Shue's son, the Dark Crow sect master, and the others, it was easy for them to destroy the Su family. However, they were all dead. Even the Rakshasa Tao Lord and the others could not escape. Not even a trace of their divine souls could escape. They were directly annihilated in the Su family's ancestral land. Obviously, with the Su family's strength, it was impossible for them to do this, unless a powerful figure from the upper world had descended to the Su family. Have you found out? Who did it? The Blood Demon sect master frowned. He did not dare to act rashly in the past 2 days because he was worried that there would be more trouble. Now that the entrance to the world of souls had opened, countless geniuses from the upper world had entered this world. Although the Blood Demon sect had the support of the Blood Demon Abyss, the saint had not arrived yet. It was not time for them to show off. When the saint arrived, not to mention the Su family, even the supreme sects in the 9 prefectures would have to bow down to the Blood Demon sect. No. Those who saw the sword cultivators attack that day were almost all from the Su family. The Su family has strictly prohibited their members from going out, so the middle-aged man's face sank. He glanced at the Blood Demon sect master with fear. Trash. Looks like we can't touch the Su family for the time being. How's the looting of the other forces? The Blood Demon sect master muttered to himself. Originally, he had planned to destroy the Su family and present the Su family's young master to the saint. Now, it seemed that there was a powerful figure from the upper world hidden in the Su family. With the Blood Demon sect master's strength, he might not be able to win even if he showed up personally. However, the Cloud Prefecture was vast and had countless sections. Now that he had sent his disciples to various places to search for spirit stones and spirit treasures, there should be some gains. Sect Master, don't worry. The other sects are doing well. Now, the Blood Demon sect's treasury has been completely filled. Chapter 1438. Good. As long as the saint descends, we can offer up our spiritual treasures. If the saint is happy, he might lead us back to the upper realm. The Blood Demon sect's sect master smiled sinisterly. Blood runes filled his eyes, making him look extremely evil. Although the world of souls had recovered its spiritual chi, the spiritual chi in the world of souls had been restored. However, many young master successors of the upper realm's immortal inheritances had descended here. In the end, they would definitely take away the divine item that had awakened the spiritual aura. In this way, it probably wouldn't be long before the lower dimensions would return to its former desolate state. Only by following the saint to the upper world and returning to the Azure continent was the correct way to open the path to immortality. Sect Master is wise and farsighted. Just as the two of them were talking, a dragon's roar suddenly resounded in the sky above Mount Blood Demon. Vast dragon might swept down, suppressing heaven and earth. The holy will of the great path fell from the sky, intimidating all the demonic beasts in the mountain. The Blood Demon sect master was stunned for a moment before a look of wild joy appeared on his face. The Holy Sun had arrived. These 2 days he was constantly on the edge, secretly guarding against the Sioux family's revenge. But now, it seemed that he had worried too much. If the one who killed Shuesun was someone from the upper realm, then he must have heard of the infamy of the Blood Demon Abyss. As such, who would dare to come to Mount Blood Demon and act presumptuously? Quick, come with me to welcome the Holy Sun. The Blood Demon sect master took a step forward and instantly appeared before the Great Hall. As for the Blood sect's elders, they stepped out of the hall, bowed behind the Blood Demon sect's sect master, and raised their heads to look at the sky. Instantly, the entire Blood Demon sect descended into chaos. Countless disciples bowed in the plaza, their eyes filled with fear. At this moment, a golden dragon jade carriage descended from the horizon. The great Tao trembled, and endless ripples appeared in the void. Vaguely, there seemed to be divine runes spreading out for 90,000 miles, and the immortal opportunity was awakened. This is a monster from the upper realm? This is too terrifying. They actually used a sacred dragon as a carriage. When the dragon carriage came to a stop, Ling Xiao stepped out. There was a faint smile on his fair and handsome face. Beside him, Yi Qingchuan and Xianyuan Weiyong stood on his left and right respectively, their gazes extremely cold. In this lower realm, the cultivation of an ordinary person of the same generation was only at the peak God-Emperor realm. Occasionally, there would be some outstanding talents, but they would only be in the first or second rank of the exalted realm. They could not be compared to the people of the upper realm. Moreover, whether it was Yi Qingchuan or Xianyuan Weiyong, their battle prowess was not something that people of the same cultivation level could contend against. Therefore, even the saints of this world were not intimidating to them at all. This, an immortal. When they saw the appearances of Ling Xiao and the other two, many of the Blood Demon sect's disciples immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Other than shock, there was also a strong sense of astonishment in their eyes. Whether it was Ling Xiao or the two women beside him, their faces could be said to be flawless like jade, especially the noble and transcendent aura emanated by the three of them that looked down upon all living beings. It wasn't something that the dogs of the lower dimensions could compare to. Furthermore, wherever the gazes of the three of them passed by, everyone would unconsciously lower their heads with fear and unease in their eyes. Even the Blood Demon sect's sect master was no exception. It couldn't be wrong. The Holy Sun must have descended. Otherwise, who in the world of dead souls would be worthy of having such an immortal aura? Greetings, Holy Sun. Greetings, Holy Sun. Cheers rose and fell one after another, like a tsunami that spread for thousands of miles. At this moment, thousands of disciples on Mount Blood Demon bowed at the same time, deeply bowing to the three people above their heads. However, at this moment, there was suddenly an astonishing sword intent above everyone's heads. The blood demon sect master was stunned. He raised his head in astonishment, only to see hundreds of sword shadows standing behind the black-clothed young man in the sky with unparalleled divine might. Immediately after, the young man suddenly waved his hand, and tens of thousands of streams of light suddenly fell like a killing formation that almost enveloped the entire square. Gulp. What's going on? I've been stabbed to death. The sword aura slashed down, and endless sword intent spread out. The strands contained frightening sword Dao rules. From afar, the entire void above Mount Blood Demon seemed to be filled with tens of thousands of divine intents that pierced through the sea and slaughtered all the demon sect disciples below. In front of Ling Xiao, these disciples from the lower realm were no different from ants. Even a few of the blood demon sect's elders had died in the torrent of sword Dao. You're the sword cultivator from the Su family. At this moment, the blood demon sect master finally understood that the young man who suddenly descended in front of him was not the holy son of the blood demon abyss, but the sword cultivator from the Su family who had killed Shue's son and the others. But you're a righteous person. It's fine if you're dressed like a demon sect villain, but what's the meaning of such a blatant massacre? Damn it. Set up the blood demon ancient formation. The blood demon sect master shouted angrily, and his figure was the first to soar into the sky. Around him, endless blood patterns evolved into mountains and seas, surging with a terrifying momentum. With his cultivation of the 5th stage of the Saint Realm, it was enough to protect himself, but to protect the sect was a fool's dream. However, if it were in the past, the blood demon sect master would most likely turn around and flee when faced with such a strong enemy. As for these disciples, as long as he did not die, he would have all the disciples he wanted. But now, the blood demon sect had spiritual treasures and spirit stones plundered from all over the Cloud Prefecture. If he fled, these resources would all fall into the hands of this black-clothed young man. How would he be able to curry favor with the Holy Sun? After weighing the pros and cons, the blood demon sect master still decided to give it his all and quietly crushed a blood jade in his hand. This blood jade was an inheritance of the blood demon sect. It could warn the blood demon abyss. Now, it seemed that Ling Xiao's strength was not something the saints of the lower realm, could resist. They could only inform the Holy Sun as soon as possible and let him come forward to solve this disaster. Humph! You could be strong as you like, but when I, the blood demon sect's Holy Sun, descend, all of you will have to bow down to me. Buzz! Vast blood intent pierced through the sky, connecting the 4 directions. All of a sudden, countless formation runes appeared on Mount Blood Demon, covering the figures of all the disciples and elders in the air. A pungent blood aura flowed out, blocking the descending sword momentum. At each of the 4 corners of the formation, there was a Saint Realm expert channeling their spiritual energy into the formation in an attempt to resist Ling Xiao's attack. Seeing this, Ling Xiao's lips suddenly curled into a gentle smile. He suddenly clenched his hand, and a pitch-black ancient saber suddenly appeared. Then, he raised his hand and gently slashed at the blood formation. Buzz! The void within thousands of miles was instantly torn apart, and a pitch-black saber radiance silently fell from the sky. However, with a saber radiance past, the heavenly Tao seemed to be completely obliterated. Time, space, and even reincarnation were all shattered by this saber radiance. The blood demon sect master opened his mouth slightly. There was nothing but fear in his eyes. Quick, stop him! As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly reached out his hand, grabbed the 2 venerable realm elders beside him, and threw them toward the blood formation above his head. Buzz! Accompanied by a buzzing sound, countless blood runes suddenly appeared in the blood formation. They actually entangled and swallowed the 2 elders, turning into surging formation power. Boom! In the end, the saber radiance crushed down and collided with the blood formation. Chapter 1439. Crack. Just as the saber light fell, a crisp shattering sound immediately resounded throughout the entire Mount Blood Demon. Even the sect protection formation that had gathered the spiritual energy of 4 Saint Stage powerhouses could not withstand the saber aura at all, and completely collapsed into a bloody mist that filled the sky. The Blood Demon sect master's expression changed drastically as he watched the saber light fall from the sky and split the entire Blood Demon temple open from the middle. The 3 elders in charge of maintaining the formation almost instantly coughed up blood and were sent flying. They no longer had the slightest bit of combat power. This scene was like a demon to all the disciples of the Blood Demon sect. Although they had long known that the demons of the upper realm were extremely talented, they still did not expect them to be so terrifying. 1 sword to kill hundreds of venerables and god emperors. 1 saber to crush 4 saints. Was he still human? He was simply a god in the sky. The Blood Demon sect is a vassal of the Blood Demon Abyss in the upper realm. The Blood Demon Holy Sun is already on his way. If you dare to kill me, the Holy Sun will definitely not let you go. Looking at the figure slowly walking over from the void, the Blood Demon sect master's face finally turned pale. Even though he was a 5th level Saint Stage cultivator, he was still too insignificant in front of this young man. His sword intent and saber aura seemed to have transcended the scope of the realm and had a domineering aura that could kill the world. It was too terrifying. These demons of the upper realm were really ridiculously strong. They could not be measured by age at all. Demons are unforgivable. Ling Xiao shook his head and raised the demonic saber in his hand, wanting to kill the Blood Demon sect master on the spot. But at this moment, the sound of rushing wind suddenly came from above the void. A bloody cloud fell from the sky, enveloping the firmament and annihilating everything. That eerie and strange aura made one's scalp tingle. In the sweet and fishy air, a figure stood at the top of the sky and slowly walked over. It was a young man in a blood-red robe with a fair face. However, his long and narrow eyes were blood-red in color. His aura had obviously not reached the Saint Stage yet, but the blood veins floating around his body were like a raging sea, rolling over and over. Who dares to be so impudent in my Mount Blood Demon? The young man shouted coldly. He lowered his head and looked at the corpses on the square below. His eyes suddenly narrowed. Behind him was an elder in a black robe. His eyes were eerie and holy will lingered around him. However, just as their gazes fell on Ling Xiao, a hint of surprise flashed in their eyes. Especially at this moment, the golden dragon jade carriage that occupied the void almost instantly caused the 2 of them to have a guess. Her black clothes were peerless, and her celestial appearance was unparalleled. The young master of the Ling people, Ling Xiao. All the major clans already knew about Ling Xiao's arrival in the lower realm. However, the Blood Demon Holy Sun did not expect that he would meet the sword immortal of this generation so soon. Holy Sun, Saint, save me. The Blood Demon narrowed his eyes, and a heartfelt smile appeared on his face. The Holy Sun had arrived. This young man is going to be in big trouble. However, even in his dreams, the Blood Demon sect master would never have imagined that just as he was feeling emotional, the Holy Sun would suddenly bow to the young man in front of him. You have offended Master Ling Xiao. Even I, the Blood Demon Abyss Master, can't save you, let alone me. The Blood Demon Holy Sun snorted coldly. The smile on his face was gentle, and there was no longer the arrogance from before. The Blood Demon Holy Sun, Li Chun, greets the Lord Ling Xiao. Li Chun? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. He did not care about the Blood Demon sect master, who staggered to the ground with a dazed expression. He nodded slightly. The Blood Demon sect slaughtered people and stole the numinous treasures. Did you order this? Ha, young master, what are you talking about? Although the Blood Demon Abyss is not a righteous sect, We do not covet the numinous treasures of the lower realm. Li Chen shook his head and smiled, his attitude extremely humble. Although in the lower realm, many sects were not as fearful of the Ling people as they were in the upper realm. In fact, with the restrictions of the heavenly Tao, this descendant of the Ling people definitely did not have a strong protector behind him. However, this realm had just opened, and Li Chun did not want to fight with this sword-down monster right away. Oh, if that's the case, you can go back. Ling Xiao smiled faintly and ignored the gloominess in Li Chen's eyes. He turned to the Blood Demon Sect Master and said, "Let's go. Take me to see your harvest these days." To be honest, the Blood Demon Sect Master's heart had already turned cold. He never dreamed that the Holy Son of the Upper Realm, who was like a god in his eyes, would be so cowardly. He had not even made a move, but he had already knelt down. Of course, although the Blood Demon Sect Master had some connections with the Upper Realm, he was still from the world of souls. He had never heard of the terror of the Ling people. But even so, his heart was still filled with endless fear. A young man who even the Holy Son was afraid of. His identity and background had already surpassed his understanding. Wait a minute. However, just as the Blood Demon Sect Master got up and was about to bring Ling Xiao to the back of the mountain, Li Chen's voice suddenly sounded. "Oh, is there something else, Holy Son?" Ling Xiao smiled and said in an extremely gentle tone. From a moment Li Chen appeared, he had no intention of letting this upper realm prodigy go. Although this Blood Demon Holy Son did not have any providence, if today's matter were spread, it would inevitably damage Ling Xiao's reputation. Moreover, Ling Xiao did not believe that this Holy Son did not have a trace of resentment in his heart after the Blood Demon sect was destroyed. Releasing a tiger back to the mountain depended on whether the value of releasing it or killing it was greater. For example, Yin Sun's escape was due to providence. Due to his hatred for the Su family and Ling Xiao, he would definitely think of ways to find opportunities to become stronger. Meanwhile, Ling Xiao only needed to wait patiently for the treasure to appear. With the heaven-concealing talisman in hand, these sons of providence could only be harvested by him. However, this Li Chun was obviously a villain, a stepping stone. Letting him go would only cause trouble. This way, killing him would end everything. Haha, I have long heard of young master's righteousness. To be honest, I came to the Blood Demon sect today to retrieve something. Li Chen glanced at the Blood Demon sect master with a fake smile. As for the rest, they all belong to young master. How about it? Oh, something? What is it? Hearing that, Ling Xiao was instantly interested. Something that could make Li Chen not hesitate to offend him would definitely not be simple. Suddenly, Ling Xiao felt that the treasure that the Blood Demon sect master had plundered was no longer attractive. Haha, actually it's not anything important. It's just that this item has extraordinary significance to the Blood Demon Abyss. I hope that young master will be magnanimous and ask Li Chen to take it away. Li Chen's eyes were deep as he pretended to be casual. I see, Blood Demon sect master. Ling Xiao nodded slightly. However, the Blood Demon sect master in front of him suddenly reached out and took out a blood-red crystal from his universe ring. He said respectfully, "Holy Son, you're talking about the Blood Demon crystal, right? I have already prepared it." However, just as the Blood Demon sect master stepped forward and was about to hand the blood crystal to Li Chen, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back. He saw a pitch-black ancient blade piercing through his chest, directly crushing his heart. Chapter 1440. You. The Blood Demon sect master turned his head with all his might and looked at the calm and indifferent face. There was clearly some doubt in his eyes. Why did this young master, who looked like an immortal, always do something unexpected? He slaughtered the common people and did whatever he wanted. His methods seemed to be more in line with the style of a great demon. Buzz. Before the Blood Demon sect master could figure it out, he saw the young man's eyes suddenly bloom with soul light. His divine soul was directly torn out by a wave of divine power and swallowed into nothingness. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. By the time Li Chen reacted, the blood demon crystal had already landed in Ling Xiao's hands. Lord Ling Xiao, what is the meaning of this? I see that this item is evil. It's better for me to keep it, unless... Ling Xiao's lips curled into a smile, and there was a hint of evil in his eyes. Saint, can you tell me the use of this blood crystal? Li Chen's eyes trembled slightly. He felt that this young master of the Ling people's temperament seemed to be very different from the rumors. There was nothing wrong with killing evil spirits. However, his actions were both good and evil, giving people an unfathomable feeling. More importantly, Li Chen suddenly had a feeling that this young master of the Ling people didn't intend to let him go from the beginning to the end. Ling Xiao, I respect you as the young master of the Ling people, so I tolerated you again and again just now. You better not go too far. At this thought, Li Chen's eyes were densely covered with blood runes, and blood energy surged around him like a real blood demon. The blood demon sect's predecessor was the inheritance of a supreme expert in the blood demon abyss. This blood demon crystal was left behind by this demon's sovereign when he had fallen. However, this item was completely useless to ordinary cultivators. Its true use was part of the blood demon abyss's inherited sacred artifact. Only when this crystal was compatible with the sacred artifact could it unleash its strongest power. This time, Li Chen's main purpose for coming here was to find this blood crystal, not to look for the fortune. He just hadn't thought that Ling Xiao would actually arrive at the blood demon sect before him. What was even more unexpected was that this young master's gentleness and humility were actually all an act. Li Chen originally thought that as long as he was humble enough, Ling Xiao would at least give him some face. Even if he took away the entire foundation of the blood demon sect, as long as the blood crystal was still with the blood demon sect master, it was not a loss to Li Chen. In a lower realm, even sacred artifacts were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. What kind of good fortune could there be? However, from the looks of it, the young master of the Ling people had wanted to kill him long ago. Oh! Overboard, the blood demon sect slaughtered the people and plundered their treasures. I killed evil demons, and you actually said that I went overboard? Holy Sun Li Chen, your ability to distort the truth has really opened my eyes. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled, not taking Li Chen's threats seriously at all. However, a completely unknown genius from the upper realm actually dared to be so unyielding. This Li Chen seemed to be something. He did not have any providence and did not have a divine body. What was this guy relying on? In that case, young Master Ling Xiao is determined to be my enemy? Li Chen raised his head and glanced at Yi Qing Chan and Xianyuan Weiyang. He nodded lightly. You're wrong, Holy Sun. I did not mean to be your enemy. I am irreconcilable with all the evil demons in the world. Ling Xiao smiled coldly and did not say anything else. The moment he waved his hand, Xiong Huan, Shurpatian, and Brute Devil's figures immediately appeared and pounced on the old man behind Li Chen. At this moment, he could feel that this old man's cultivation was at least at the 7th stage of the Sage Realm. With Yi Qing Chan and Xianyuan Weiyang's current cultivation level, it was impossible for them to be his match. Good. Irreconcilable with all the evil demons. Ling Xiao, this is the lower realm. No one will protect you anymore. Li Chen gritted his teeth and looked coldly at Xiong Huan and the other two. Fortunately, Ling Xiao did not have anyone at the peak of the Sage Realm by his side. This way, he still had a chance. He had to get the blood demon crystal back. Since the young master of the Ling people wanted to kill him, there was nothing to worry about. I, Ling Xiao, am open and above board. The heavenly law will protect me. Ling Xiao smiled. His black robes fluttered in the wind. Then, he took a step forward and charged towards Li Chen. Arrogant. Although Li Chen acted tough on the surface, he didn't underestimate Ling Xiao in the slightest. He was the only young master of the Taigu Ling people in 100,000 years. Just this identity alone was enough to explain many things. He suddenly clenched his fist, and a blood-colored halberd appeared in his hand. Suddenly, the void darkened and thousands of Daos went silent. Countless blood traces appeared in the sky and turned into a surging ocean. Li Chen's figure was like a god of war who walked out of a sea of blood. He was evil, terrifying, and insufferably arrogant. Oomph. Blood demon halberd art. 8,000 forces. Buzz. Li Chen struck out with his halberd, and the sea of blood behind him suddenly surged. The world in front of Ling Xiao suddenly turned blood red. Even the sky was dyed red. A terrifying pressure pressed down, as if a sea of blood had fallen. It had the power to suppress all living things. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes and slashed out with the demonic blade in his hand. The void was instantly torn apart, and the sea of blood was directly split into two. However, in the next moment, Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes, and murderous intent rose in all directions. At this moment, he could see that Li Chun had actually turned around and pounced towards Yi Qingchuan and Yi Qingyu after launching the attack just now. To him, there was no meaning in fighting Ling Xiao at this moment. He only needed to capture one of the two women to exchange for the blood demon crystal in Ling Xiao's hands. Then, his trip would be complete. As for whether he would meet Ling Xiao again when the true treasure of this world appeared in the end, that was another matter. After all, he wasn't afraid. He just didn't want to reveal his trump card too early. Buzz. However, just as Li Chun reached out his hand to capture Xinyuan Weiyong, he saw layers of ice floating in the void in front of him. A terrifying chill quietly pervaded the air, and the hand that he had stretched out strangely lost all feeling. How is this possible? Li Chun was stunned, and his eyes turned cold. However, before he could react, the ice crystals that were fluttering in the air suddenly sped up and enveloped his figure like a snowstorm. Crack! The blue sky was sealed in a breath. Even the rift seemed to have come to a standstill, like an ancient glass mirror that was emitting a seven-colored glow. Ling Xiao looked up and saw that Li Chun had been frozen into a sand sculpture. There was no trace of relaxation in his eyes. At this moment, he could feel that Li Chen's aura was rising at a terrifying speed, and his realm had reached the second stage of the Saint stage in just a few breaths. It was obvious that the blood demon Holy Sun was going to use his true trump card in the face of Yi Qingchuan's attack. Chapter 1441. Suddenly, a black light bloomed in the sky. Ling Xiao took a step forward, and the demonic blade in his hand slashed down toward Li Chen's head. At this moment, he naturally felt the latter's surging aura. In fact, he could even vaguely sense a trace of vicissitude in this aura. However, no matter what Li Chen's trump card was, Ling Xiao did not intend to give him a chance to use it. Crack! In an instant, the ice crystal shattered, and the frost owl law that imprisoned Li Chun was shattered by Ling Xiao's saber. However, just as the demonic blade was about to pierce through Li Chen's body, his eyes suddenly opened. They were like a sea of blood, surging with thousands of ripples. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes, and the ancient blade in his hand shone brightly with lightning. Countless avatars appeared in the sky, but this time there was no trace of panic in Li Chen's eyes. He raised his hands and used the blood halberd to collide with the demonic blade of Samsara. The terrifying power directly crushed the entire sky. Li Chen's figure was sent flying, and he only stopped after crashing through several ancient mountains. In the sky, Ling Xiao held the demonic blade in his hand and looked down at the smoke and dust that filled the air. At this moment, he vaguely felt that Li Chun seemed to be a different person at this moment. He had an ancient and immortal feeling. Suddenly, a figure walked out of the smoke and dust. Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes slightly, but the corners of his mouth curled up in a sinister smile. At that moment, strange blood tattoos covered half of Li Chen's face. From afar, it looked like half a mask, like a demon, and it was frightening. Behind him, a pair of bone wings drooped down, and it was extremely intimidating. Ling Xiao, I'll give you one more chance. Hand over the blood demon crystal, and our grudges will be written off. Li Chen's voice was inexplicably hoarse, and his eyes that were covered by the blood patterns actually showed a sinister white color. In that eye, Ling Xiao seemed to see endless white bones covering the ground, a sea of blood floating, and the wheel of tribulations. Right off, Ling Xiao shook his head. At this moment, he already had some guesses in his heart. There seemed to be a terrifying creature sealed within Li Chen's body. This kind of half-human, half-demon posture was indeed very intimidating. But the problem is, I'm not human either. With the demonic qi surrounding Li Chen's body, even if Ling Xiao used the sky demon will, it would not be detected by these ants from the lower domain. Very good. You should be proud that you can become the first sacrifice after my seal is broken. Li Chen smiled sinisterly. Without any warning, a white bone hand shot out of his white eye and pierced towards Ling Xiao. This strange scene was indeed a huge visual impact. However, it was of no use to Ling Xiao. He held the saber in one hand and slashed down. Boundless Taoist rhymes gathered on the blade. Time stopped, and chaos reopened. The countless white bones shattered, and Li Chen's figure was annihilated in the void. There was a sudden buzzing sound. Ling Xiao's eyes turned cold. He felt a terrifying force surging behind him. He turned around and punched out. At this moment, Li Chen also stretched out his palm behind him. Layers of blood veins covered his palm. His divine power was unparalleled. It was like the bloody arm of a demonic god that wanted to suppress Ling Xiao on the spot. In comparison, Ling Xiao's punch was too hasty and too perfunctory. Crack! The moment the two fists collided, the crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. Terrifying spatial ripples spread out. Even though Li Chen clearly had the upper hand in this punch, he was still sent flying by Ling Xiao. Even the arm covered by the blood veins had countless fine cracks. It was about to shatter. How is this possible? Li Chen's eyes narrowed. The mockery in his eyes had long disappeared. At this moment, he realized that this young master of the Ling people's fame was not only due to the Ling people. Whether it was the sword Dao or the strength of his physical body, he could completely crush him without the seal. That's right, Li Chen's name was rarely mentioned. The Blood Demon Abyss was originally a demonic sect in the Azure Sky sect. It was always resisted by the orthodox cultivators. As the Holy Son, Li Chen also shouldered the heavy responsibility of reviving the sect's prestige. Therefore, after his cultivation reached the Venerate realm, he made a bold decision. He sealed an ancient demon that was worshipped in the Blood Demon Abyss into his body. This process was extremely dangerous and painful. If he was not careful, he would even be possessed by the ancient demon and completely become a killing machine. Fortunately, after 100 years, Li Chen finally succeeded. Therefore, he rarely appeared in the battles of the current generation. It was because in these 100 years, he had been on the verge of death. Originally, when the world of souls opened this time, he had planned to crush the current generation and become famous. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated the talents of the Azure Sky sect. At this moment, facing Ling Xiao, he had already unsealed half of the power, but he was still easily crushed by this young master of the Ling people. It seemed that if he did not use his full strength today, he would really be born and die. Boom! Blood spurted out from Li Chen's body again. The blood tattoo that had originally only covered half of his face turned into countless tentacles. As if it was alive, it quickly climbed towards his entire body. Vast demonic power surged out, and every blood mark seemed to contain extreme power. His aura rose again, reaching the 3rd level of the Saint Realm. Even his eyes had turned white at this moment, revealing an endless amount of strangeness. This is terrifying demonic qi covered heaven and earth. Under this aura, even Xinyuan Weiyang's face was inexplicably pale. At this time, she could feel that the Li Chen in front of her was no longer a living creature of flesh and blood, but a real demon, towering over heaven and earth. The demonic power was shocking. Is this the complete form? Ling Xiao looked at the changes in Li Chen's body, but there was no trace of emotion on his face. It was obvious that Li Chen had completely unsealed at this time. releasing the power in his body that did not belong to him. Sealing a demon into one's body could indeed increase one's combat strength in a short time. However, relying too much on external forces would ultimately make it difficult to reach the peak of heaven and earth. Ling Xiao, Azure Sky, you are the first to force me to use this demonic body. If I don't kill you today, I, Li Chun, will end my own reincarnation. Li Chun laughed sinisterly, his tone domineering. In his opinion, no matter how strong Ling Xiao was, he was just a saint. However, the ancient demon he had merged with was once the peak of heaven and earth. Are you worthy of being called a demon? Ling Xiao stood in the air, demonic intent swirling around him. However, under the cover of the divine light around him, this demonic intent did not attract the slightest bit of attention. This was the lower realm. The heavenly Tao's order was not enough to withstand the power of a supreme weapon. Therefore, even if the snow-tide rock was hidden in the dark, it could not use the power of the immortal demon ancient bell. Setting a flag? Poof! Do you understand what I mean, everyone? Buzz. As a buzzing sound resounded through heaven and earth, Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly split open, and a black vortex seemed to appear. His figure almost instantly disappeared from where he stood. Then, an indescribably terrifying demonic power suddenly gathered. A figure shrouded in multicolored light appeared strangely in front of Li Chun. The pair of outstretched hands were covered in black scales, and the demonic power was ancient. Every trace of it contained a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth. Chapter 1442. Ling Xiao's most terrifying ability was the sky demon's body that had fused with the demon bone, forged the sword bone, and had the unforgiven demonic armor. After all, the sky demon's body was different from ordinary divine bodies and sacred bodies. It was an innate body that was born in the primordial world and tempered by the heavenly Tao. Even though Ling Xiao had yet to awaken his 9th transformation stage, his physical strength was still incomparable to that of the current generation. In the past, Ling Xiao did not have the chance to use the sky demon's power in the Azure world. But now, in the lower realm, without the restrictions of the Realm Master Hall, he could finally test out exactly how strong his physical body was when he used his full strength. Boom! Without any nonsense. Ling Xiao did not even care whether the person standing in front of him was Li Chun or the ancient demon sealed in his body. As he punched out, the chaotic, demonic intent intertwined and fell. Everyone could only see a pure, black whirlpool gathering under his fist. What surged within it were streaks of completely different principal power. Divine trees, tides, flames, and mountains rose and fell one after another. Yin and yang reversed. Chaos was reborn, and time and space alternated. Vaguely, these Tao laws seemed to fuse into one, destroying everything and destroying the 9 heavens. Furthermore, under this punch, Li Chun's surging battle intent instantly froze. There was no way to resist, or rather, they were not even on the same level. Ling Xiao had already surpassed the limits of the current generation. In other words, this punch had no realm. Even a supremacy would not be able to withstand the destructive power of this punch. Boom! Finally, Ling Xiao's punch landed on Li Chun's chest. The blood tattoos that covered the latter's body shattered almost instantly. No, it should be said that the current Li Chun was directly shattered by Ling Xiao's punch. From head to toe, from the inside out. Regardless of whether it was his divine soul, his bones, or the ancient demon that he had fused with, they were all shattered by this destructive power. Is this the power of the sky demon? Ling Xiao lowered his head and looked at his palms. His eyes were extremely calm. At this moment, he did not expect that the seemingly indestructible blood devil would be so weak that it could not even withstand a single blow from him. It was actually directly turned into nothingness by his fist. Not even a trace of its spiritual consciousness was left behind. Xionghuan, stop. Feeling the sudden surge of demonic power in the distance, Ling Xiao's face changed, and he immediately shouted. Xiong Huan's fist that was supposed to land on the Blood Abyss Saint's head immediately froze in the void, and then he turned his head with a blank expression. Master, bring him here. Ling Xiao gave Yi Qingchuan a look, and the latter immediately understood. A cold light appeared in her eyes, and the entire peak of Mount Blood Demon was suddenly covered in white snow. Compared to Ling Xiao's domineering methods, Yi Qingchuan's methods had a wider range and were much more convenient to slaughter. Now, the Blood Demon sex experts were all dead, but there were still some disciples who were scared out of their wits and curled up on the ground, shivering. As for the demons, we naturally have to kill them all without mercy. Buzz! The sky was filled with ice crystals, and it was like an unparalleled celestial scene. In just a short moment, the entire Mount Blood Demon seemed to be covered in snow. Even the palace and ancient trees were covered in a layer of sparkling ice crystals, dazzling and resplendent. As for the Blood Demon sect's disciples who were only at the God Emperor and Divine Lord realm, they were sealed into ice sculptures and no longer had a trace of life. After doing all this, Yi Qingchuan landed beside Ling Xiao with a smile on her face. She hugged his arm and stuck to his body. Tell me, what's the use of this Blood Demon crystal? Ling Xiao played with the blood-colored crystal in his hand and lowered his head to look at the Blood Demon Abyss Elder, who was crushed to the ground by Xiong Huan and Shirpatian. Ling Xiao, you're cruel and tyrannical. Before he could finish his sentence, black flames suddenly burned in Ling Xiao's eyes. The Sage Realm expert felt his entire body boiling. His entire body was enveloped by the black flames and slowly burned into nothingness. You buzz! A wisp of soul light quietly surged, and the Sage Realm expert's divine soul was absorbed into Ling Xiao's soul sea and devoured. I see. Ling Xiao's lips curled into a smile. He suddenly clenched his fist, and the Blood Demon ancient halberd that fell to the ground buzzed and turned into a stream of light that fell into his hand. When Li Chun used this halberd earlier, Ling Xiao also felt its power. A mid-grade saint artifact. For ordinary sex, this grade of saint artifact was already the best. In fact, even a faction like the Blood Demon Abyss only had a mid-grade saint artifact. However, to Ling Xiao, sacred weapons and whatnot were too common. Of course, mid-grade and low-grade saint artifacts were naturally not attractive to Ling Xiao. As for high-grade and peerless saint artifacts, even in the entire Azure world, they were the best treasures. After all, the only supreme artifact in the world now was the immortal demon Ancient Bell in the Realm Lord's palace. This Blood Demon crystal was originally one with this halberd. It was unknown how it ended up in the lower realm, or it could be said that this Sage Realm Elder did not know. Li Chun had obviously come to the lower realm for this Blood Demon crystal. He should have known the origin of this item long ago. Ling Xiao sized up the countless demonic runes on the Blood Demon halberd. His eyes turned cold. He gently pressed the Blood Demon crystal on the totem in the middle. Buzz! Suddenly, there seemed to be demonic shadows on the Blood Demon halberd. Waves of demonic aura that could be seen with the naked eye spewed out, turning into a sea of blood that floated 30,000 miles. The void trembled, and the azure sky was dyed red with blood. Even Yi Qingchuan and Xinyuan Weiyang took a few steps back in surprise. Clearly, they could not resist the ferocity of the halberd. Only Ling Xiao stood on the spot with the Blood Demon halberd in his hand. There was no change in his expression at all. A high-grade saint artifact was unparalleled in demonic power. It was a rare treasure. Weiyang, you don't have a natal spiritual treasure yet, right? Ling Xiao turned to look at Xinyuan Weiyang, who was panicking, and suddenly smiled warmly. Young master, the demonic aura in this halberd is too terrifying. I'm afraid only the human emperor's saint blood can suppress it. You should learn to hold the halberd first. With that, Ling Xiao casually threw the Blood Demon halberd to Xinyuan Weiyang. Then he walked down the mountain. Shirpatian, go and move the treasuries at the back of the mountain. Yes, young master. Xinyuan Weiyang hugged the Blood Demon halberd tightly with both hands. Her delicate body trembled slightly. Clearly, she did not expect the blood demon halberd to be so heavy. However, when she felt the terrifying demonic aura surging from it, her eyes flashed with joy. What she cultivated was the power of her bloodline. Although the demonic aura in the halberd was rather demonic, she would be able to suppress it completely if she was given some time. At that time, the power in the halberd would be the human emperor's Saint Aura. Young master, Wei-Yan will definitely not disappoint you. She will definitely learn how to hold the halberd. Chapter 1443. Young Master. When Ling Xiao and Yi Qingshan reached the foot of the mountain, Su Yan's voice came from the universe ring. Young Master Hua is here. Su Yan's voice was calm. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently and said, "Tell her to wait." When he used his polychoria earlier, he suddenly had a bold idea. Since his eyes could merge with the power of the nether fire, did that mean he could also absorb the heaven and earth spirit fire? Especially now that Ling Xiao had merged with several heaven and earth spirit fires, his power was unprecedented. If he could merge the heaven and earth spirit fires with his polychoria, would he be able to burn everything in his sight? Qingshan, wait here for sure, Patian. With that thought, Ling Xiao disappeared from spot. Realm, Heavenly Hall. Now that Ling Xiao had perfected the law of time, the flow of time in this realm was several times slower than the outside world. 1 day here was equivalent to 10 days in the outside world. Ling Xiao sat quietly in front of the heavenly hall, his body covered in flames. The dark flames that were between black and purple almost incinerated the void into nothingness and formed numerous deep and terrifying spatial rifts. At a certain moment, Ling Xiao suddenly opened his eyes. The purple flames formed by the fusion of the 3 heaven and earth spirit fires suddenly gathered in one of his eyes. Suddenly, the sky darkened and the wind and clouds changed. Bolts of lightning surged through the sky, tearing everything apart as if it was the end of the world. Everyone looked up in horror and looked in the direction of the heavenly hall. There a figure was quietly sitting cross-legged like a god, one of a kind since ancient times. Above his head, a blood moon shone brightly and devoured all light. However, what was terrifying was that there seemed to be a purple-black lotus shadow beside the blood moon. It appeared and disappeared, containing the power of nothingness. "Merge!" Ling Xiao shouted coldly. The purple heaven and earth spirit fire surged into a whirlpool and disappeared into Ling Xiao's left eye. Time froze, and the heavenly Tao ceased to exist. Even the strange phenomenon in the void quietly disappeared at this time. At this moment, both of Ling Xiao's eyes were tightly shut, but there was blood dripping from his left eye. It was a ghastly sight, until the young man's eyes abruptly opened, and the space before him instantly shattered. Boundless purple-black divine flames soared into the sky, engulfing heaven and earth and incinerating everything. However, Ling Xiao's eyes were strangely divided into 2 forms. His eyes were as red as blood, and a black moon rose. One was like a lotus, while 3 petals burned the sky. "Did you succeed?" Ling Xiao stood up and looked up at the sky. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. Buzz. Accompanied by a buzzing sound, the divine light in Ling Xiao's eyes dissipated. His figure also disappeared from where he was and appeared at the foot of Mount Blood Demon. "Young Master," seeing the figure descending from the sky, Yi Qingshan immediately revealed a smile. She turned into a green shadow and rushed into the young man's arms. For some reason, after coming out of seclusion this time, she felt even more captivated. She wanted to feel his warmth at all times. "Let's go." Ling Xiao casually put Xiong Huan and the others into his realm. Then he hugged Yi Qingshan and sat in the dragon carriage, heading toward Misty Cloud City. At this time, he did not even check the cosmos pouch that Xiong Huan and the others handed to him. In the lower realm, sacred artifacts were extremely rare. What kind of precious fortune could there be? Look, the young master is back. Quickly, report to the patriarch. In Misty Cloud City, countless figures walked out of the Su family's main hall. The one leading them was not the Su family's patriarch, Su Qin-shan, but a beautiful woman in white. At this moment, there seemed to be a faint smile on her face. Compared to a year ago, Hua Mingxi's aura was clearly more vigorous, faintly touching the boundary of the sacred stage. Beside her, Su Qin-shan, Su Kai, and the others stood quietly, looking somewhat reserved. The Hua family's young master, regardless of status or identity, was no longer comparable to the current Su Kai and the others. Just as Ling Xiao said before, the Hua family's young master came this time to bring the Su family to the upper realm so that they could join forces to fight against the Lu family. From Hua Mingxi, Su Kai and the others already knew that the Su family's young master, Su Shan, had been robbed and killed 200 years ago. The current Su family's young master was a piece of trash called Su Yu. He only knew how to eat, drink, and play all day long. Even his cultivation level was increased by elixirs. Greetings, young master. The dragon carriage stood tall, and a black-clothed figure walked over. Her face was full of gentleness. The corners of Hua Mingxi's mouth curled up into a bright smile. She actually bowed down under the dumbfounded gazes of Su Kai and the others. Young master? Ling Xiao had already revealed his identity. Taigu Ling people. However, Su Kai and the others still did not expect that this young master was the young master of this clan. This identity was 10,000 times more honorable than the Hua family's young master or the Su family's young master. Suddenly, Su Kai and the others felt a little terrified. They felt that they did not respect this Ling people's young master enough. Even if the Su family had already treated him as a distinguished guest, but it was still not enough. Plop! Accompanied by a dull sound, Su Kai suddenly knelt down on the ground and said in a heavy voice, "I didn't know that the young master was coming. Please forgive me. It's fine." Ling Xiao smiled without any arrogance. Mingxi, long time no see. Yes, it's been a year. Young master, do you miss Mingxi? Hua Mingxi's eyebrows were like silk, and a blush appeared on her beautiful face. With her identity, it was indeed a little frivolous for her to say such words. Even Su Kai and the others had a faint look of surprise on their faces. However, before Ling Xiao could speak, a wisp of cold air quietly spread between heaven and earth. Hua Mingxi's eyes narrowed slightly as she turned her head to look at the young lady in green standing beside Ling Xiao. She frowned slightly and asked, I forgot to introduce her to Mingxi. This is Yi Qin-chan, my concubine." Yi Qin-chan? Hua Mingxi suddenly smiled and looked meaningfully at Ling Xiao. Hua Mingxi naturally knew about this new master of the Foliaceae. Previously, it was because of this lady that Ling Xiao's name was known throughout the Azure continent and was feared by all clans. The patriarch of the Foliaceae was even killed by a supreme existence of the Ling people. This incident had almost become a shadow in the hearts of many heavenly sovereigns in the Azure continent. They did not expect that she would actually come to the world of dead souls with young master this time. However, looking at Yi Qin-chan, she was indeed beautiful. Her cold temperament was different from Gu Chaoxiai's indifferent and domineering temperament, but it gave off an inexplicable attraction. "I have heard about you for a long time." Hua Mingxi nodded slightly. Although she was smiling, there was no trace of warmth in her voice. "Let's go in and talk." Ling Xiao shook his head with a smile and took the lead to walk into the main hall of the Su family. Hua Mingxi smiled slightly and seemed to ask casually, "Young master, did Empress not come? After parting in Dao Sky City, I really miss the Empress." Hearing that, Yi Qin-chan's pretty face turned cold, but the corners of her mouth curled up into a bright smile. She looked at Hua Mingxi as if she was looking at a dead person. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.